Ben Franklin effect abuse. Have you ever noticed how weird it feels when someone you don't even like asks you for a small favor, and for some reason you actually say yes? And then, strangely enough, you start feeling a little bit warmer toward them afterwards. It doesn't even make sense. You didn't like them before. They just asked you to help, and now suddenly your brain is saying, well, maybe they're not that bad. That's not an accident. That's called the Ben Franklin effect. And when people abuse it, it's one of the sneakiest manipulation tricks you'll ever come across. Here's the backstory. Ben Franklin himself noticed that if he wanted to get on good terms with someone who didn't like him, he wouldn't bribe them with gifts or try to charm them. Instead, he'd ask them for a favor, like borrowing a rare book. After the person did it, something strange happened. They started to like him more. Why? Because the human brain hates feeling inconsistent. If I do something nice for you, but I didn't like you before, my brain starts arguing with itself. Wait, if I don't like this person, why did I help them? Oh, maybe I do like them after all. The brain literally rewrites the story to make the action make sense. Now, on its own, that's not evil. It's just an odd quirk of psychology. But here's where it gets dark. People who know about this effect can weaponize it. Instead of earning genuine respect or friendship, they trick you into slowly warming up to them by making you do little things for them, not the other way around. It flips the script. Normally, you'd think doing favors builds goodwill from the giver to the receiver. But in reality, the giver's brain twists it and says, well, I must like them, otherwise I wouldn't be helping them. Let me give you a scenario. Imagine a new coworker you don't particularly like. They rub you the wrong way. But one day they lean over and say, hey, could you lend me a pen? Easy enough. You hand it over. No big deal. The next week they ask, hey, can you take a quick look at this report? Just a glance. Then maybe they ask if you can cover for them at a meeting. Each time your brain is making tiny adjustments. Well, I keep helping them, so maybe I don't actually dislike them. Before you know it, you're defending them in office passive and actually feeling loyal, even though nothing about their behavior has improved. They hacked your psychology. Now picture that in relationships. Someone you're dating might ask you for just small favors constantly. Carry this, grab that, do this quick errand. At first, it's harmless, but over time, it builds a pattern of compliance. You start feeling attached because your brain wants to justify why you're investing energy into them. That attachment isn't built on mutual care. It's built on manipulation. And let's not forget salespeople and marketers. Some of them are masters at this. Think about when a salesperson asks, could you just take a quick survey? Or could I have 2 minutes of your time? That's not innocent. The moment you agree, your brain is already bending. Well, if I let them take my time, they must not be so bad. Then you're more open to hearing their pitch, even buying something you didn't need, all because of a 2-minute favor. The most dangerous part, this tactic works best when the favors are tiny, nothing dramatic. If someone asks you to lend them $1,000, your brain might resist. But if it's something like lending a pen, holding a door, reviewing a page, it slips under the radar. Dozens of small favors later, your brain has been rewired to feel friendlier and more cooperative. And that's how someone you originally disliked ends up having influence over you. So why is this unethical? Because it hijacks the natural wiring of your brain. Instead of building trust by being honest, kind, or reliable, they exploit a psychological loophole. They get you to trick yourself into liking them. You think your feelings are genuine, but really they've been engineered. Here's how you spot it. Ask yourself, do I actually respect this person, or do I just feel warmer toward them because I've been doing things for them? If the only reason you're defending or liking someone is because you've invested small favors, that's a red flag. Real respect should come from their behavior toward you, not the other way around. And here's how you protect yourself. Don't automatically equate helping someone with liking them. Sometimes we help because it's polite, convenient, or we don't want conflict. That's fine, but be aware when the favorites start stacking up. If someone you don't trust keeps pulling you into these tiny tasks, stop and think, are they trying to earn my friendship, or are they trying to trick my brain into rewriting the story? The Ben Franklin effect shows us something powerful. We don't just do favors for people we like. We start to like people because we do favors for them. And while that sounds harmless in theory, in the wrong hands, it becomes a tool of manipulation. The next time you catch yourself warming up to someone after a string of small favors, pause. Ask yourself, do I actually respect this person, or do I just feel warmer toward them because I've been doing things for them?
The false choice trap. Have you ever been in a situation where someone gave you two choices and both of them sucked? Like when your boss says, "Do you want to stay late to finish this project, or do you want to come in early tomorrow?" Neither sounds appealing, right? But notice how the setup makes it feel like those are the only two possible options. That's the false choice trap, a sneaky trick that boxes you into picking between two bad doors, even though there might be a whole hallway of better ones they're conveniently hiding from you. Here's the psychology behind it. Humans don't like uncertainty. When someone presents us with limited options, our brain relaxes a little because the world feels simpler. Instead of thinking about a million possibilities, you only have to weigh two. And because we're wired to resolve things quickly, we often accept those limited options without stopping to ask, wait a second, who decided these were my only choices? That's the trap. Let's make it super relatable. Imagine a parent telling their kid, "Do you want broccoli or spinach for dinner?" The kid feels like they're in control, but both options are vegetables they probably don't want. The parent could have offered pasta or chicken or literally anything else, but by framing it this way, they've trapped the kid into choosing something the parent wanted all along. It feels like freedom, but it's really a cage painted to look like a door. This tactic shows up everywhere. In relationships, it might sound like, do you want to keep arguing about this? Or do you want to just admit I'm right so we can move on? Yikes! Both options are designed to make you lose. Or maybe you've seen it in sales. Do you want the basic plan that barely covers anything, or do you want the premium plan that's way overpriced? Notice what's missing? The fair middle ground, or the option to not buy at all. By limiting the choices, they push you into a decision that benefits them. Politicians are masters at this. How many times have you heard something like, do you want higher taxes or do you want crumbling infrastructure? Or the reverse, do you want to support our plan or do you want to see the country fail? It's manipulative because it erases the possibility of nuanced solutions. The whole point is to corner you emotionally and logically into agreeing with the choice they want you to make. Now, here's why it works so well. People don't like the awkwardness of rejecting the whole setup. If you're at a car dealership and the salesperson says, "Do you want the red model or the blue model?" Most people won't say, "Actually, I don't want either. I'm leaving." It feels uncomfortable, like you're breaking the social script. And that discomfort is what the manipulator is counting on. They rely on the fact that you'll choose something instead of stepping back and questioning the entire frame. Think about job interviews. A boss might say, Would you rather take the lower pay with better hours or higher pay with terrible hours? Both options exploit you in different ways, but because they framed it as an either-or, you might be forced to compromise in a way you normally wouldn't. That's the brilliance and the danger of the false choice trap. So why is this unethical? Because it pretends to offer freedom while secretly removing it. You think you're making a choice, but really, someone else already made the decision for you and disguised it as empowerment. It's manipulation wrapped up in the illusion of control. Here's the scary part. The more tired, stressed, or distracted you are, the easier it is for this trick to work. If you're exhausted at the end of the day and someone says, "Do you want to deal with this now or tomorrow morning?" you're less likely to stop and ask, "Wait, is there a third option where I don't deal with it at all?" That's why this tactic gets used so often in workplaces, sales pitches, and even arguments, because it's fast, efficient, and sneaky. Now, how do you protect yourself from it? The first step is recognizing it. Anytime you're presented with two options, especially if both are bad, pause. Ask yourself, are these really my only choices? Who benefits if I pick one of these? Sometimes just realizing the setup is rigged is enough to stop the manipulation in its tracks. The second step is to break the frame. You're allowed to say, "Actually, I don't like either of those choices. Here's what I'd prefer instead." It feels uncomfortable at first because you're stepping outside the script they want you to follow. But once you do it a few times, you'll see how powerful it is to refuse the trap. The false choice trap is basically a magician's trick, but instead of pulling a rabbit out of a hat, they're pulling your freedom out from under you. They take away all the possibilities that exist in the real world and hand you a fake menu with only 2 items. And here's the kicker: most people don't question the menu. They just pick something and move on, never realizing they got played. So next time someone asks, "Do you want A or B?" don't be afraid to say, "Actually, I'll take option C." Because more often than not, the real power comes from refusing to let someone else control the choices in the first place.
Strategic silence. You know that super uncomfortable moment when you're talking to someone, you finish your sentence, and instead of replying, they just stay quiet? At first, you're okay with it, but after a few seconds, that silence feels heavy. It's awkward. It's almost like your brain can't handle the quiet, so you start blurting things out just to fill the space. And that right there is what manipulators count on. That's called strategic silence, a creepy little trick where someone uses nothing but a pause to make you reveal more than you wanted to or to push you into agreeing with them. Now, let's be clear. Silence on its own isn't bad. Sometimes silence is just a normal part of conversation. But when someone uses it on purpose as a tool, that's when it gets manipulative. Here's how it works. Humans are wired to avoid social discomfort. Long, awkward silences feel unnatural. We want to smooth them over, so we rush to talk again. And in that rush, we often end up giving away more than we meant to. The manipulator doesn't have to say anything. They just sit back, let the quiet grow, and wait for you to crack. Picture this. You're at a job interview. You've answered a question confidently, and you're feeling good. But the interviewer just stares at you without reacting. 10 seconds go by. 15. Now your brain is screaming, "Oh no, did I say something wrong?"
So you start backpedaling, clarifying, adding extra details you hadn't planned to share. Maybe you reveal weaknesses you shouldn't have mentioned, or you talk yourself into a corner, all because they weaponized silence. Another example, negotiating. Let's say you're trying to sell your old car. You tell the buyer, "I'm asking for $5,000. Then you wait. They just sit there looking at you, saying nothing. The silence grows. You feel like you need to keep talking. So you say, "But, I'd be willing to go down to 4,500. You just lowered your own price without them saying a single word. They didn't argue, they didn't push, they just let the silence eat at you until you filled it with a concession. And it doesn't stop there. In relationships, this tactic can be brutal. Imagine you're apologizing for something small, and your partner just stays completely silent. No nod, no reassurance, just stone-cold quiet. You panic. Are they mad? Did I mess up worse than I thought? So you keep talking, apologizing more, maybe even confessing to things you didn't need to. The silence becomes a psychological trap that pulls words right out of you. Why does this work so well? Because silence feels unnatural in human interaction. We're social creatures. Conversation's like a rhythm, a back-and-forth dance. When one side refuses to keep the rhythm going, the other side scrambles to fix it. That scramble is where mistakes happen. Strategic silence forces your brain into discomfort, and discomfort makes you vulnerable. Now, let's talk about why this is manipulative. If silence were used neutrally, like giving someone time to think, that's fine. But manipulators don't use it that way. They use it as a weapon to get what they want. Extra information, confessions, discounts, compliance. They don't earn your honesty or your compromise. They squeeze it out of you by making you so uncomfortable that you hand it over just to break the tension. That's not a fair exchange. That's exploitation. You see this in sales all the time. A salesperson asks, "So, do you want to go ahead with the purchase today?" Then silence. They don't fill the air with chatter. They just stare at you, smiling politely. That silence pressures you into saying something, and 9 times out of 10, people fill it with, "Yeah, sure, I'll do it." It feels easier than sitting there with that thick, awkward quiet. The silence makes the no feel heavier than the yes. So how do you defend yourself against this? First, recognize it. If someone stays quiet longer than feels natural, ask yourself, are they just thinking, or are they trying to push me into talking more? Second, get comfortable with silence yourself. If you learn to sit in that discomfort and not flinch, the power shifts back to you. Imagine this. Someone offers you a terrible deal, then goes quiet, waiting for you to cave. If you just stay quiet too, the ball bounces right back into their court. Eventually, they'll be the one who cracks and starts talking. Silence only works as a weapon if you're afraid of it. Here's a trick. When you sense someone using strategic silence, remind yourself that you don't owe them extra words. If your answer is complete, let it stand. If your price is firm, leave it there. If your apology was genuine, stop talking. The silence is their move, don't make it yours to fix. Think about it like this. Silence is like a blank canvas. You can choose to paint on it, or you can leave it blank. Manipulators count on you to feel so uncomfortable with the blankness that you rush to fill it. But if you don't, if you just let that canvas sit empty, they lose their power. The tension they created flips back on them. So the next time someone tries to pull the strategic silence trick on you, don't panic, don't scramble, just breathe. Recognize that silence isn't dangerous. It only feels that way because your brain is wired for connection. If you can resist filling the silence, you'll stop one of the simplest yet most effective manipulation tactics in its tracks.
Love bombing withdrawal. Imagine this. You meet someone new, and from the very beginning, they treat you like you're the most amazing person in the world. They flood you with compliments, texts, attention, little gifts, maybe even dramatic declarations of love way too soon. It feels intoxicating. You're thinking, wow, did I just stumble into a fairy tale? Did I just meet my soulmate? That's the first stage of love bombing, when someone overwhelms you with affection, intensity, and attention. But here's the catch. The bombing isn't the whole trick. The real manipulation happens when they suddenly pull all that love away. One day, they're showering you with praise. The next, they're distant, cold, or even critical. And what happens to you? You panic. You crave the warmth you just had. Your brain starts working overtime, wondering, what did I do wrong? How do I get them back to the way they were before? That's the hook. That's the love bombing withdrawal. Creating dependency by flooding you with affection, then ripping it away so you chase after it like a drug. This works because the human brain is wired to notice sudden changes in attention and reward. When someone is constantly nice to you, you get used to it. It feels normal. But when that kindness suddenly disappears, your brain freaks out. It's called intermittent reinforcement, the same principle that keeps people addicted to slot machines. You don't get a win every time, but every once in a while you do. And that unpredictability makes you chase it harder. In relationships, that means you cling even tighter to the person who's mistreating you, just hoping to get back to that initial high. Think about it. If someone was mean from the start, you'd probably walk away. If someone was always sweet and consistent, you'd feel secure. But when they swing between extremes, overwhelming love one moment, cold silence the next, it scrambles your emotional radar. You start blaming yourself. You think, if I just try harder, maybe they'll love me the way they did in the beginning. And that's exactly what the manipulator wants. They have trained you to work for their affection instead of expecting it freely. Here's an example. A partner who, in the first month, sends you good morning texts every day, surprises you with flowers, and tells you, I've never felt this way about anyone before. It's dizzying, but once you're hooked, the tone shifts. Suddenly, they stop texting back. They cancel plans. They say things like, you're too needy, or I just need space. You're left confused, desperate, and willing to do whatever it takes to get back to the version of them that adored you. That version wasn't real. It was bait. This doesn't just happen in romantic relationships. It happens in friendships, families, even workplaces. A boss might start by praising you endlessly, making you feel like a superstar employee. But then they start withholding recognition, ignoring your efforts, or criticizing you unfairly. You chase after that validation, working harder and harder, just hoping they'll go back to the nice boss version you met at first. The truth? That kindness was just a setup. And let's not ignore cults or high control groups. They are notorious for love-bombing new recruits. Overwhelming acceptance, hugs, attention, you're family now. But once you're in, they start pulling back. You're criticized, isolated, told you need to earn that love back by obeying the rules or giving more of yourself. That cycle of reward and withdrawal keeps people trapped for years. Now, why is this tactic so unethical? Because it messes with your basic need for love and belonging. Everyone craves connection. Manipulators know this, and they hijack it. They make you feel like you found something rare and precious, then they yank it away to make you dependent on them. It's emotional blackmail disguised as romance, friendship, or loyalty. So how do you protect yourself from it? First, pay attention to speed and intensity. If someone comes on way too strong, way too fast, that's a red flag. Real love and real trust take time to grow. If it feels like you're being swept off your feet in a whirlwind of over-the-top affection, pause. Ask yourself, is this genuine or am I being love-bombed? Second, watch for consistency.
Healthy people don't flip between extremes. They don't tell you you're perfect one week and treat you like a burden the next. If the affection feels like a roller coaster, that's not love, that's control. Third, trust patterns, not promises. A manipulator will promise you the world when they're in love-bombing mode, but their patterns of withdrawal reveal the truth. Don't fall for the highs and ignore the lows. The lows are part of the tactic. The hardest part of spotting love-bombing withdrawal is that it feels so personal. When the affection disappears, it feels like you messed up, like you weren't good enough to keep their love. But the truth is, it's not about you at all. It's about control. They create the wound, then make you believe only they can heal it. That's the cycle that keeps people trapped. Here's the bottom line. Love that's given only to be taken away isn't real love. It's manipulation. If someone makes you feel like affection is something you have to chase, like it can be given or withdrawn at their convenience, step back and ask yourself, do I want to be in a relationship where love is a weapon? Because real love, whether it's from a partner, a friend, or family, isn't a prize you earn or a drug you get hooked on. Real love is steady. It's consistent. It doesn't disappear the moment you stop playing by someone else's rules.
Repetition illusion. Okay, let me start with a question. Have you ever heard a statement so many times that at some point you caught yourself thinking, wait, maybe that's true after all, even if deep down you weren't sure about it? That's not your imagination. That's the repetition illusion, also called the illusory truth effect. Basically, if you repeat a lie enough, the brain starts treating it as truth. And here's the scary part. It doesn't even matter if you know it's a lie. The repetition alone makes it feel more believable over time. Now, why does this happen? Our brains are kind of lazy when it comes to processing information. When you hear something new, your brain has to work harder to evaluate it. But when you hear the same thing again and again, it feels familiar. And your brain loves familiarity. Familiar things feel safe. They feel easier to process. And that easiness, that fluency, tricks your brain into saying, well, if I've heard this so many times, it must be true. That's the illusion. Let me give you a real-world example. Think about advertising slogans. Red Bull gives you wings. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. You need 8 glasses of water daily. You've heard these so many times they feel like facts, but none of them are strictly true. Red Bull doesn't give you wings. Breakfast being the most important meal was actually a marketing campaign by cereal companies in the early 1900s. And 8 glasses of water? That number was plucked from vague guidelines and repeated into a myth. But the repetition locked it into our collective brains. This isn't just harmless marketing, though. The repetition illusion is one of the most powerful weapons in politics and propaganda. Dictators, spin doctors, even social media influencers use it constantly. Ever notice how certain phrases get hammered over and over in news cycles? Weapons of mass destruction, fake news, war on terror, make America great again. It doesn't even matter whether you agree or disagree. The sheer repetition makes the phrases stick in your head, and the familiarity tricks your brain into treating them as truths, or at least as unquestionable realities. And it's not just big systems doing this. People use this tactic on a personal level too. In toxic relationships, someone might constantly tell you you're overreacting, you're too sensitive, you're always the problem. The first time you might argue back. The 5th time you start to doubt yourself. The 50th time you believe it. That's how abusers can rewire someone's self-image, not with evidence, but with repetition. The worst part, the illusion works even when you know it's happening. Studies have shown that people rate repeated statements as more truthful even if they were told beforehand those statements were false. Your conscious brain might resist, but your unconscious brain just goes, oh yeah, I've heard this a lot, must be legit. That's how deep this runs. Here's a simple way to feel it. Think of a song lyric you misheard as a kid.
You sang it wrong for years. Then someone corrected you, told you the real lyric. But even now, when the song plays, doesn't your brain still want to sing it the wrong way? That's repetition. That's how powerful it is. It can outlast correction. So why is this unethical when used as manipulation? Because it bypasses rational thinking. Instead of persuading you with logic, evidence, or honesty, manipulators overload you with the same phrase, the same lie, until your brain just surrenders. They're not convincing you, they're training you. It's less about free thought and more about brainwashing light. How do you defend yourself? The first step is awareness. If you notice you're hearing the same phrase, claim, or narrative over and over, pause. Ask, is this being repeated because it's true, or is it being repeated to make me think it's true? That little question puts you back in control. The second step, expose yourself to variety. Don't rely on one source of news. Don't let one person dominate your inner circle with the same narrative. The more diverse your information sources, the less likely your brain is to get lulled into believing repetition equals truth. And third, fact-check yourself. If you catch yourself thinking, well, everyone knows X, stop and ask, wait, do I actually know that? Or have I just heard it 1,000 times? That tiny act of skepticism can save you from swallowing falsehoods disguised as familiarity. Think about it this way. Repetition is like water dripping on a stone. 1 drop doesn't matter. 10 drops don't matter. But after years of steady dripping, the stone wears down. Your brain is the stone. The repetition illusion is the water. And if you're not careful, eventually that lie carves itself into your beliefs, no matter how tough you thought you were. So the next time you hear something over and over, whether it's from a politician, a partner, an ad, or even your own thoughts, don't confuse familiar with true. Just because the echo is loud doesn't mean the message is real.
Forced inconsistency. Let's be real for a second. Everybody contradicts themselves sometimes. It's human. One day, you say you hate pineapple on pizza. The next day, you're eating a Hawaiian slice like it's the best thing ever. Our moods change. Circumstances change. Even our knowledge changes. That's just life. But manipulators know that human inconsistency can be used as a weapon, and that's where forced inconsistency comes in. This tactic is all about digging up your past words, actions, or opinions, then cornering you with them to make you feel guilty, stupid, or unstable. The manipulator doesn't care if you had perfectly valid reasons for changing your mind. They just want you to feel trapped, like you're not allowed to grow, rethink, or adapt. Here's what it looks like in real life. Imagine you tell a friend, I don't think I'll ever want kids. 5 years later, you're in a new relationship, and you realize you actually do want them. Instead of supporting your growth, that same friend might go, wait a second, didn't you say you never wanted kids? Wow, so you're just a hypocrite, huh? Bam, you're cornered. The point of the attack isn't to have a discussion, it's to make you feel inconsistent, confused, and defensive. Or take the workplace. Let's say you once supported a project idea, but after seeing new data, you realize it's a bad plan. A manipulative boss could slam you with, but last month you said this was the way forward. Which is it? Were you lying then, or are you lying now? Notice how the trap works? You're forced to defend yourself, even though what you did, changing your opinion based on new evidence, is actually rational and healthy. It can even show up in relationships as a subtle control trick. Picture this. You tell your partner one evening that you don't feel like going out much anymore. 2 weeks later, you mentioned you'd love to try a new restaurant. Instead of being happy, they hit you with, "Wow, so now you suddenly like going out. Last time you said you didn't. Which version of you am I supposed to believe?" That's not curiosity, that's manipulation. They're not asking to understand you better, they're poking at your inconsistency to destabilize you. And here's the deeper layer. Forced inconsistency plays on our natural human need for cognitive consistency. Psychologists have long studied this. We like to think of ourselves as coherent, stable, logical beings. When someone points out that we've contradicted ourselves, it feels like an attack on our identity. So what happens? We scramble to explain, justify, or backpedal, which gives the manipulator the upper hand. Even worse, some manipulators keep track of your past words on purpose. They'll store up little quotes, screenshots, or memories, just waiting for the perfect moment to spring them back on you. It's like emotional blackmail. But remember when you said becomes their favorite weapon. And when you hear it enough times, you might start censoring yourself, afraid to ever change your mind or express a new thought because you know they'll use it against you later. That's when the trap has really worked. Now, let's flip this around. Why do manipulators love this tactic so much? Because it's a win-win for them. If you stick with your old opinion, even when it no longer makes sense, you look stubborn or irrational. If you admit you've changed your mind, they call you a hypocrite. Either way, they paint you as wrong. And when you're busy defending yourself, you're not noticing the fact that they're the one pulling the strings. The truth, though, is this. Changing your mind is not weakness, it's growth. You should expect to be inconsistent sometimes because life throws new information and new experiences at you every single day. What's really unhealthy is being so rigid that you refuse to evolve, just to avoid someone saying, "But that's not what you said before." So, how do you protect yourself from forced inconsistency? Step 1, recognize it for what it is. If someone keeps cornering you with your past words, ask yourself, are they trying to understand me? Or are they just trying to destabilize me? That distinction is everything. Step 2, own your evolution. Instead of panicking when someone calls you inconsistent, calmly say, "Yeah, I used to believe that. Now I see it differently." That one sentence destroys the trap. It removes the shame. You're not inconsistent, you're adaptive. And that's something to be proud of, not ashamed of. Step 3, watch out for patterns. If the same person constantly plays this game, you need to ask whether they're really someone who respects your growth or someone who wants to keep you stuck. Because at the end of the day, people who truly care about you won't weaponize your past words. They'll give you space to change. So next time someone tries to corner you with, "But last time you said," don't get flustered. Remember, you're allowed to change. You're allowed to grow. The fact that they need to dig up your past just to destabilize you says more about their control issues than about your inconsistency. The bottom line, forced inconsistency is manipulation disguised as accountability. Don't fall for it. You're not a hypocrite for evolving. You're a human being.
The Trojan compliment. Let me ask you something. Have you ever gotten a compliment that didn't sit right with you? Like, instead of feeling flattered, you felt off. Almost like there was a little sting hidden inside the nice words? That's not just your imagination. Sometimes praise isn't really praise at all. It's a Trojan compliment. The name comes from the famous story of the Trojan horse.
On the outside, it looked like a beautiful gift, but on the inside, it was packed with soldiers ready to attack. A Trojan compliment works the same way. On the outside, it looks like someone is praising you. But inside that gift of kind words, they've tucked in a little tiny doubt, a jab, or a suggestion that undermines your confidence. Here's a classic example. "Wow, you look great in that outfit. Way better than what you usually wear." Sounds like a compliment, right? But think about it. Hidden inside the praise is a message that you usually don't look that good. Suddenly, you're not basking in the compliment anymore. You're wondering, wait, so I normally look bad? The compliment built you up just to knock you back down. Another one. "You did really well on that project, especially considering you don't have much experience." At first, you feel good. Hey, they noticed your hard work. But the second half plants doubt. Do people think I'm inexperienced? Am I just getting lucky? That's the Trojan part. The compliment smuggled in insecurity. This trick works so well because our brains are wired to soak up compliments. Compliments trigger dopamine, the feel-good chemical. That's why flattery feels so nice. But when someone sneaks a negative edge into that praise, it slips past your defenses. You're too busy feeling the dopamine hit to immediately catch the poison inside. By the time you process it, the doubt has already been planted. And here's where it gets dark. Manipulators use Trojan compliments to control your self-image. If they constantly praise you in a way that also undermines you, you'll start to see yourself the way they want you to see yourself. They can make you feel lucky to have them, insecure without their approval, or forever chasing that real compliment that never comes. Let's put this in a relationship context. Say your partner says, "You're really pretty when you wear makeup." At first glance, that sounds nice, but the hidden message? Without makeup, maybe you're not that attractive. Over time, you start to feel pressured to always look a certain way because you think their love depends on it. That's not love, that's control, wrapped in the disguise of kindness. Or at work, a boss might say, "You handled that meeting well. I didn't expect that from you." You might laugh it off in the moment, but later it gnaws at you. What did they mean they didn't expect it? Do people think I'm inexperienced? Am I just getting lucky? That's the Trojan part, the compliment smuggled in insecurity. This trick can mess with your head long term, because instead of feeling confident in your achievements or qualities, you start questioning them. You think, am I good at this, or did I just get lucky? Do I look good today, or is it just because I dressed differently? Am I only smart compared to low expectations? That constant second-guessing is exactly what the manipulator wants. A doubtful mind is easier to control. So, how do you spot a Trojan compliment before it worms its way in? Here's the trick. Listen for the but, or the especially, or the for someone who. That's usually the hinge where the praise flips. For example, "You're pretty smart for someone who, you did great, but that was impressive, especially considering." Those little add-ons are where the truth sneaks in. And how do you deal with it? One option is to call it out directly. "Thanks, but I noticed there was a bit of a backhanded edge there. What did you mean by that?" Most people who use this trick don't expect to get caught, so shining a light on it takes away their power. Another option is more subtle. Accept the compliment part and ignore the hidden jab. If someone says, "You look nice today, unlike usual," just respond with, thanks. I appreciate that. You cut off the poison and keep the gift. At the end of the day, here's what you need to remember. A real compliment builds you up without tearing you down. If someone's praise leaves you feeling smaller, less confident, or more insecure, it wasn't a compliment. It was a Trojan horse. And once you learn to spot the soldiers hiding inside, you'll never let them ambush your self-esteem again.
The scarcity clock. Let's play a little game. Imagine you're scrolling online and suddenly you see it. Flash sale, 80% off, but only for the next 2 hours. Your heart starts racing, right? You weren't even planning to buy anything, but suddenly you're thinking, wait, what if I miss out? You click, you rush, you put in your credit card, and before you know it, you've bought something you didn't even want an hour ago. That, my friend, is the scarcity clock at work. It's one of the oldest, dirtiest tricks in the book of manipulation, and it works because our brains hate the idea of missing out on opportunities. We call it loss aversion. Losing something feels twice as painful as gaining something feels good. So when someone dangles a ticking clock in front of us, our rational thinking goes out the window. We don't calmly ask, do I really need this? Instead, we panic about what we'll lose if we don't act right now. The scarcity clock is everywhere. Think about airline ticket websites. Only 2 seats left at this price. That might be true, or it might be total nonsense. Booking sites have been caught red-handed generating fake scarcity warnings just to push people into buying something. Suddenly, you're not choosing the best flight for your budget. You're scrambling to beat some invisible timer. Or think about those late-night TV ads we used to see. Call within the next 15 minutes and we'll double your order. Do you really think the deal magically disappears after 15 minutes? No. That phone line will happily take your order tomorrow, next week, or next month. The 15-minute timer isn't about logistics. It's about psychology. It's about making you feel like hesitation equals losing. Now, here's the scary part. The scarcity clock doesn't just sell products. It's used in much darker ways. Manipulative partners sometimes use it in relationships. Picture this. If you don't decide to move in with me by the end of the week, I don't think this is going to work out. That's not a loving discussion about the future. That's a manufactured deadline to bulldoze you into a choice you're not ready for. By slapping a clock on the decision, they take away your ability to think clearly, to weigh your options, or to act on your own timeline. Even bosses or managers pull this stunt. Ever been told, we need your decision by the end of the day, or the opportunity is gone? Sometimes urgency is real, but often it's artificial. It's there to keep you from negotiating for better pay, more time, or a better role. The pressure forces you to act fast before you can call a friend, sleep on it, or realize you're being lowballed. And of course, politics loves this move too. Think about campaigns that scream, we only have 24 hours to raise this amount or we're doomed. They crank up the panic so you hit that donate button. It's not about giving you space to think about whether you actually support the cause or not. It's about driving you into a rushed, emotional decision. So, why does this tactic work so well? Simple. Our brains equate scarcity with value. If there's less of something, we assume it must be important, rare, or better. Add a countdown timer, and suddenly the stakes feel sky high. That combo hijacks your rational part of your brain. You're no longer weighing pros and cons. You're running on survival instinct, like you've got to grab the last piece of food before someone else does. Here's something wild. Studies show that even when people know a timer is fake, it still influences them. Our brains aren't built to ignore a ticking clock. It's like seeing a big red button that says, do not press. Even if you know it's a trick, the pressure messes with you anyway. So,
How do you fight back against the scarcity clock? Here's the secret. Pause. If you see a timer on a website, remind yourself, most of the time, the deal will still be there tomorrow. If it's a real limited offer, it'll be back in some form later. And if someone in your personal life slaps a deadline on you, ask yourself, do I want to make this choice, or am I being forced into one? If the answer feels rushed, that's your sign to step back. One trick I use personally, when I see a countdown on a shopping site, I literally close the page and walk away. If I still want the thing after an hour or tomorrow, then I'll come back. 9 times out of 10, I don't. The fake urgency only works if you let the clock control you. At the end of the day, the scarcity clock is just a shiny distraction. It's smoke and mirrors. Real opportunities don't vanish because you took time to think. Real love doesn't evaporate because you didn't make a snap decision. Real value doesn't disappear just because you hesitated. The only people who benefit from the scarcity clock are the ones selling you something, whether that's a product, a contract, or even themselves. So, the next time you see a flashing countdown timer or someone tells you, decide now or lose it forever, take a breath, recognize the trick, and remember, the only thing that really runs out when you slow down is their control over you.
The false consensus trick. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a room where someone says, well, everybody thinks this is the best idea, and suddenly you feel like the odd one out if you disagree? That's the false consensus trick in action, one of the sneakiest forms of manipulation out there. It's basically peer pressure wrapped in a fancy disguise. Instead of convincing you with facts, logic, or genuine discussion, the manipulator pretends there's already a universal agreement. They make it sound like you're the last person holding out, the lone wolf refusing to go along with the pack. And nobody likes being the oddball. Here's why it's so effective. Humans are social creatures. We evolved in groups, and survival depended on fitting in. Being left out of the tribe used to mean danger, isolation, even death. Fast forward thousands of years, and our brains still panic at the thought of being the outsider. So when someone says, everyone already agrees, our instinct is to fall in line rather than risk standing out. Marketers love this trick. You've probably seen ads that say, join the millions who have already switched. Or, our most popular package, everyone's choosing it. Maybe they don't even show the real numbers. They just create the illusion of a majority, and suddenly you feel weird for not joining in. It's not about whether the product is good. It's about you not wanting to be the only one left behind. Politicians? Oh, they're masters of this move. Watch how often they say things like, the people have spoken, or everyone knows this is what's best. Do they actually mean everyone? Of course not. But the phrase makes it sound like you're in the minority if you don't nod along. They're not persuading you with reason. They're socially cornering you. Even cults and manipulative groups thrive on this trick. New members are often told, all of us believe this, and it's worked for every single person here. It's an illusion of total consensus. And when you're the new person, hearing that everyone else has already bought in, you're way more likely to silence your doubts and follow along. Because nobody wants to be the oddball who questions the group, especially in a tight-knit setting. Now, the false consensus trick doesn't just happen in big, flashy scenarios. It happens in everyday life, too.
Imagine you're at work and someone says, "Well, everyone agrees we should do it this way." Do you stop and ask, "Wait, did you actually check with everyone?" Probably not. Most people just assume it's true and go along with it. But in reality, everyone might be just two people in a corner office who never asked the rest of the team. Or think about relationships. A manipulative partner might say, "All my friends think you're overreacting." Or, "Everyone agrees I'm right about this." Do they actually have a council of advisors weighing in? No, they're just weaponizing imaginary consensus to make you second-guess your feelings. It's a way of saying, "It's not just me, the whole world thinks you're wrong." Which, of course, is usually a complete exaggeration. So why does this tactic feel so heavy when it lands on us? Because it combines two fears, the fear of being wrong and the fear of being alone. If everyone already agrees, then disagreeing means you're both mistaken and isolated. That double punch is powerful enough to shut people up, even when their gut is screaming that something's off. Here's a fun twist. Studies in psychology show that people often overestimate how much others agree with them. That's called the false consensus effect. Manipulators just take advantage of that natural bias and push it onto you. They say, "See, everyone's on my side." And your brain, already wired to believe groups must know better, falls right into the trap. How do you fight back? The magic question is, who exactly is everyone? When someone pulls this trick, ask them to name names. If they say, "All the customers love this," respond with, "Can you show me the reviews?" If they say, "Everyone here thinks this," ask, "Really? Who did you talk to?" 9 times out of 10, the big, mysterious everyone melts down into a vague shrug. Because the truth is, they weren't speaking for a crowd, they were speaking for themselves and just inflating it. Here's the thing, real consensus doesn't need to be shouted about. If truly everyone agrees, you'll feel it naturally. The vibe in the room will match. But when someone is trying hard to tell you everyone already agrees, that's usually a red flag that they're faking it. So the next time you hear phrases like, "Everyone knows this is the right way," "Nobody disagrees with me," "All smart people believe this," pause for a second. Don't get swept up. Remember that everyone might mean nobody but the manipulator themselves. At the end of the day, the false consensus trick is just smoke and mirrors. It's an attempt to bully your brain into compliance by making you afraid of standing out. But here's the truth. Being the lone voice of dissent isn't weakness. It's often the first sign that you're actually thinking for yourself. And that, my friend, is something no fake consensus can take away from you.
Shame stacking. All right, picture this. You're in a situation where someone keeps tossing little jabs at you. Not outright insults, not enough to cause a scene, but tiny digs that pile up one after the other. Maybe it starts with, "Wow, you're late again." Then later it's, "You really don't know how to do that?" And finally, "Are you seriously wearing that?" By themselves, each comment is small. You could shrug it off. But when they come one after another, they start stacking. Before you know it, you're drowning in a tower of tiny shames, and suddenly you're willing to do whatever it takes just to make it stop. That's shame stacking in a nutshell. It's not about dropping one big insult to knock you down. It's about piling on small embarrassments until your defenses crumble. It's sneaky. It's subtle. and it's one of the most draining forms of manipulation out there. Now, here's the messed up part. Humans are wired to avoid shame like the plague. Back in ancient times, being shamed meant being cast out of the tribe, and if that happened, survival was nearly impossible. So shame triggers a survival-level panic in us. We'll bend, apologize, and even betray ourselves just to escape it. Manipulators know this. They don't need to fight you head-on. They just keep sprinkling shame crumbs until you surrender. Let's look at how this works in real life. At work, a boss might say things like, "Didn't expect you to mess that up again. Still don't understand this? Everyone else got it. Guess you're not cut out for this project." One by one, each remark seems like a casual comment, but when repeated enough, they paint you as incompetent in your own head. And what happens next? You start working harder, longer, and bending over backwards to prove yourself. You stop arguing, you stop resisting, you stop pushing back. The shame stack has done its job. In relationships, it can be even worse. Imagine a partner who doesn't scream at you, but instead layers shame gently. "You really don't know how to cook that. Why do you always say things like that in front of people? Other people's partners don't act like this." Ouch. None of these are giant explosions, but over time, the constant drip of embarrassment makes you feel small, unworthy, even lucky that this person is putting up with you. And when you feel that low, what's the easiest way to survive? Agree with them, give in, do what they want. That's how shame stacking creates control. Now let's talk about a classic example: sales and scams. Ever walked into a store where the salesperson says things like, "Oh, you've never heard of this brand? Really?" Or, "Most people your age already know this feature." They're not giving you information. They're quietly layering embarrassment. The goal? To make you feel out of the loop, unintelligent, or unprepared, until you finally say, "Okay, fine, just give me the product." Shame stacks are powerful tools in closing sales because people hate feeling less than. Even parents can accidentally or deliberately use shame stacking. Instead of one big scolding, they'll stack little things. Like, "Did you really get a B? Your cousin always gets A's. Look at how you're dressed, people will laugh. Why can't you be more like your sibling?" By the third or fourth remark, the kid isn't thinking about the lesson. They're thinking, "I'll do anything to make this stop." That's the hidden danger. Shame stacking doesn't build better behavior. It builds fear and compliance. Here's the kicker. Most of the time, the shame stacker counts on you not noticing the pattern. They know you'll brush off each remark individually, but your brain still records them. Over time, the pile of micro-embarrassments feels as heavy as one massive humiliation. That's when you cave. So how do you fight back? The secret is awareness. The next time you notice someone making a habit of pointing out your flaws in little ways, stop and call it out. Say something like, "You've made 3 comments about me today. What's going on?" That interrupts the pattern. Or flip the script by not reacting emotionally. When you stop showing embarrassment, the manipulator loses their fuel. Shame stacks only work if you feel the shame. Without your reaction, their tower crumbles. Another trick is to mentally separate each comment. Instead of letting them pile up, take each one as a single event. Ask yourself, do I actually need to feel bad about this? 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. Shame stacking works because it's death by 1,000 cuts. But once you recognize it, you can step out of the game. Remember, one small embarrassment doesn't define you, and a pile of them doesn't either. That's just someone else trying to build control over you with bricks that don't even belong to you. Don't carry their shame stack. Knock it down and walk away. Reverse victimhood. Okay, let's get real. Reverse victimhood is one of those manipulations that messes with your head in ways you don't even notice at first. Basically, it's when someone who's actually in the wrong flips the script and makes themselves look like the real victim, and suddenly you're the one feeling guilty. Picture this. You call out a partner for something hurtful they did. Instead of acknowledging it, they respond with something like, "Wow, after everything I've done for you, you're making me out to be the bad guy? I can't believe you're treating me like this." Whoa, wait, aren't you the one who got hurt? That's reverse victimhood. They're trying to twist the story so that you question your own feelings, your own memory, and even your own sanity. This tactic is powerful because humans are wired to avoid hurting others, especially people we care about. When someone claims they're the victim, our instinct is to comfort, apologize, or soften our stance, even if we know they're lying. That instinct is exactly what manipulators exploit. It shows up in relationships all the time. A classic example, an abuser gets angry, screams, or criticizes you. When you react, instead of taking responsibility, they say something like, "I can't believe you're making me feel like I did something wrong. I'm the one who's been hurt here." Or, "After everything I've sacrificed for you, this is how you treat me?" Notice the pattern? You end up apologizing, not because you did something wrong, but because their story made you feel guilty. They're rewriting reality to protect themselves and control you. It's not just romantic relationships, though. Think about workplaces. A manipulative boss might shout at an employee, and when the employee finally protests, the boss responds with, "I'm shocked that after all I've done for this company, you accuse me of being unfair?" Suddenly, the employee feels bad, not the boss. The shift is subtle, but it's insanely effective. Politics and media exploit this too. Leaders or spokespeople often use reverse victimhood. The media is out to get me. Critics are trying to destroy me. Whether or not they're the ones causing harm, claiming victimhood makes their audience sympathize with them and question the legitimacy of complaints against them. And here's where it really messes with people psychologically. It creates self-doubt. If someone keeps using reverse victimhood on you, you start asking yourself, am I overreacting? Am I too sensitive? Maybe I really am the bad person here. And that's exactly what they want. They don't just want to avoid accountability, they want you to internalize the blame. It's sneaky because it often comes with emotional theatrics. Tears, sighs, dramatic pauses, all designed to make you feel like a villain. Even small acts of self-pity can make you abandon your own sense of truth. Manipulators are basically performing emotional gymnastics, and you're the audience that gets trapped in the act. So, how do you spot reverse victimhood? Look for this telltale sign. Someone responds to criticism by making it about their feelings rather than addressing the issue. Another sign, if you find yourself apologizing or backtracking even though you were in the right, that's a red flag. Defending yourself requires two things: clarity and boundaries. First, remember your perspective matters. Just because someone claims victimhood doesn't erase your experience. Second, set boundaries. You don't have to engage in their blame games or absorb guilt that isn't yours. Calmly stating your truth and walking away from the drama is often the most effective response. It's also useful to verbalize the tactic for yourself. They're trying to make themselves the victim to silence me. That's manipulation. Naming it strips it of power.
The more you recognize it, the less effective it becomes. The danger of reverse victimhood is that it's so invisible. People don't usually see it coming because it hijacks empathy, our natural desire to comfort those in pain. But once you know the pattern, you start seeing it everywhere, from toxic friendships to workplace politics to the news. At its core, reverse victimhood is about control. It's a way to dodge accountability, guilt trip others, and manipulate situations in favor of the abuser. But the power only works if you let it. By recognizing the tactic and standing firm in your truth, you can prevent them from rewriting reality and keep your own sense of self intact. Bottom line, don't let anyone hijack your empathy to gaslight you. Their tears, complaints, or poor me stories don't cancel your experience. You're allowed to feel what you feel, say what you need to say, and protect yourself, no matter how convincing their victim act is.
Weaponized empathy. All right. Let's talk about something that sneaks into everyday life more than you might think. Weaponized empathy. This is when someone knows you're a caring, compassionate person and deliberately uses that to get what they want. Basically, they're taking your natural desire to help and turning it into a tool to manipulate you. Think about it. Most of us like to help. It feels good. We get a rush when we do a favor for someone in need. That's the human brain wired to feel satisfaction from being generous. But manipulators exploit this. They don't just ask for help. They engineer situations that make it hard for you to say no without feeling guilty. Here's a classic example. Imagine a coworker comes to you with a problem that isn't really yours. Maybe they forgot to finish a report and says, "I've been so swamped, you're the only one who can help me finish this by today. I know you're the only one who cares enough to get it done right." Whoa, that's not just asking for help. That's pressuring you with flattery and guilt at the same time. You feel like if you don't help, you're letting them down or proving that you don't care. And just like that, your empathy is weaponized. You're doing work you didn't have to, all because someone knows how to push your emotional buttons. It happens in relationships too. A manipulative partner might say something like, "I'm really struggling emotionally, but I don't want to burden you. I guess you just don't care enough to be here for me." That's subtle, right? They're not outright demanding something, but they're planting a silent obligation. Your compassion kicks in, you step up, and suddenly you're sacrificing your own needs to ease their guilt, even though you didn't sign up for that role. Even charities and campaigns sometimes weaponize empathy. Emotional storytelling, heartbreaking images, urgent appeals, all designed to make you feel responsible for alleviating someone else's suffering. On a larger scale, it works psychologically the same way. Your brain hates seeing someone in distress, and you naturally want to help. Manipulators know this instinct and exploit it. The danger here is that weaponized empathy can erode boundaries. Over time, if someone keeps leveraging your compassion, you may start feeling guilty anytime you don't give in. Your empathy becomes a trap rather than a gift. You might think, "I can't say no because I'm a bad person if I do." And that's exactly the point. So how do you spot it? Watch for these patterns. The person frames their request to make you feel uniquely responsible. They mix flattery with guilt. "You're the only one who can help," or "I thought you'd understand." The request is emotionally loaded. It tugs at your heartstrings rather than presenting a neutral fact. Once you see it, how do you handle it without feeling bad?
First, remind yourself that compassion does not mean overextending. Being empathic doesn't obligate you to sacrifice your time, energy, or well-being. Second, separate your feelings from their manipulation. You can still care about someone without giving in to every engineered emotional tug. A simple, calm, "I understand you're struggling, but I can't take this on right now," is enough. You don't need to over-apologize or justify yourself endlessly. Here's a small mental trick that helps. Imagine their request as a neutral fact, stripped of guilt or praise. Once you see it for what it is, just a request, not a moral test of your character, you can respond rationally. That mental shift weakens the manipulator's power. Weaponized empathy is everywhere. It could be your coworker, your friend, your partner, or even social media campaigns. And it works because it hijacks a positive human trait, our ability to care, and turns it against us. The more aware you are of it, the less effective it becomes. Remember, empathy is a strength, not a weakness. Don't let anyone exploit it to control your actions. You can care, you can help, but you can also protect your boundaries. That balance is where your power lives.
Emotional Russian roulette. Let's be honest. Humans crave stability. We like knowing where we stand with people, especially the ones we care about. But manipulators know this, and some of the nastiest tactics play on uncertainty. One of the most mind-bending tricks is called emotional Russian roulette. Basically, unpredictable swings between kindness and cruelty designed to keep you off balance. Picture this. One day, someone showers you with compliments, attention, affection, the works. You feel valued, loved, even a little euphoric. The next day, maybe for no reason you can see, they're cold, critical, or dismissive. And the next day, back to the charm offensive. That unpredictability keeps you hooked. You're constantly wondering, will today be amazing or awful? This works because of something called intermittent reinforcement, a concept studied in psychology and often used in gambling. Casinos know it. People keep playing slot machines because they don't win every time. The wins are unpredictable, and that uncertainty keeps people engaged. Emotional Russian roulette works the same way. You don't know when the next win of affection is coming, so you stay invested, trying harder to earn it. In relationships, this can look like a partner showers you with gifts and praise one week, and then the next week they criticize everything you do. They say loving, sweet things, then suddenly ignore you for hours or days. Small kindnesses are mixed with emotional punishment, making you constantly question yourself. Over time, your brain starts associating their approval with survival, attachment, and even self-worth. The roller coaster of highs and lows rewires your emotional system. You become hyper-focused on keeping the peace, predicting their next mood, and desperately chasing the good days. And it's not just romantic relationships. Workplace manipulators do this too.
Think about a boss who praises your work one day, then rips into you in front of colleagues the next. Or a teacher who alternates between favoritism and criticism, keeping students anxious and striving for approval. It's the same principle. Unpredictability creates dependency. Even friends can play this game. One day they're your rock, texting support and making you laugh. The next day they disappear, ignore your messages, or throw subtle jabs. That emotional instability keeps you invested, always hoping to regain their affection or approval. The terrifying part? You don't usually see it coming. At first, you might blame yourself. Did I do something wrong? But the truth is, the swings are about control, not your behavior. Manipulators thrive on the emotional chaos they create. They don't want consistent interactions. They want to keep you on edge, guessing and seeking their approval. So how do you spot emotional Russian roulette? Watch for patterns. Unpredictable cycles of warmth and coldness, emotional highs followed by sudden crashes, a feeling that you're walking on eggshells, never sure what will set them off. And here's how to protect yourself. First, name the behavior. Just recognizing that someone is deliberately alternating kindness and cruelty gives you perspective. Second, set boundaries. Decide what treatment is unacceptable and communicate it clearly. Third, detach emotionally. You don't have to match their intensity or chase their approval. Their moods are not your responsibility. The scary genius of emotional Russian roulette is that it plays with your natural attachment instincts. Humans bond by predicting and responding to social cues. When those cues are unreliable, our brains go into overdrive, trying to fix or manage the relationship. Manipulators exploit that instinct to control you without even needing to raise their voice. At the end of the day, emotional unpredictability isn't love, friendship, or mentorship. It's manipulation. It's designed to make you dependent, anxious, and constantly seeking validation. Recognize the pattern. Protect your mental space. And remember, stable, healthy relationships don't feel like a roller coaster you're trapped on. They're consistent, respectful, and predictable in all the ways that matter. So, the next time someone alternates between extremes in behavior, stop and ask yourself, am I interacting with a person or a psychological game? Once you see it for what it is, the power shifts back to you.
Doubt seeding. All right, let's dive into something really sneaky. Doubt seeding is when someone drops little comments, sometimes seemingly innocent or casual, designed to make you question your own memory, judgment, or perception of reality. And the scary part? It often happens so subtly that you don't even notice it at first. Imagine this. You remember a conversation clearly. You know exactly what was said. Then someone casually says, "Are you sure it happened that way? I don't remember it like that." Maybe it's repeated over time and suddenly you start thinking, wait, did I imagine that? Maybe I'm overreacting. Boom, that's doubt being seeded.
This tactic is incredibly effective because our brains are wired to rely on social confirmation. Humans are social animals. If someone we trust suggests we're wrong, we instinctively second-guess ourselves. Doubt-seeding exploits that instinct, quietly planting uncertainty in your mind so you become more malleable and easier to manipulate. It happens in all sorts of relationships. At work, a colleague might say, "I thought we agreed on this, but maybe I misunderstood you." Over time, you start doubting your own decisions, notes, or plans. Or in personal relationships, a partner might casually remark, "I think you're overreacting, that never happened." Again, you start questioning your feelings, your memory, your sense of reality. Even small offhand comments count. Things like, "Are you sure that's what happened? I don't remember you doing it that way." You always see things so differently. On their own, these seem minor, but when repeated over time, they stack and create a deep sense of self-doubt. And guess what manipulators want? They want you doubting yourself, because a self-doubting person is easier to control. You're less likely to argue, resist, or trust your instincts. You start leaning on them for clarity, exactly where they want you. This is actually the core technique behind gaslighting, which you might have heard of. Gaslighting is basically doubt-seeding on steroids, a long-term campaign to make someone question their reality. But even short-term or casual doubt-seeding works to subtly undermine confidence and assert control. Why is it so effective? Because the manipulation feels like it's coming from normal conversation. There's no yelling, no big confrontation, just tiny remarks, little suggestions that nibble away at your certainty. Your brain naturally searches for consistency, and when someone keeps challenging your memories or perceptions, it starts trying to reconcile their view with yours, often making you question yourself in the process. Here's a practical example. A manager repeatedly hints that you might have miscommunicated a client's instructions. You double-check your emails, your notes, and even your memory. Over time, you start thinking, "Am I really careful enough? Maybe I'm making mistakes I don't see." That's doubt being planted. And once it's there, you might be more likely to defer to their guidance, over-apologize, or follow their lead without question. Doubt-seeding can also be weaponized emotionally. A partner might say, "I think you're just imagining that I was being rude. I was just tired." Suddenly, your interpretation of behavior, something you trusted, starts to feel questionable. You might even apologize for expressing your feelings. The manipulator has subtly shifted the power balance, all with a few casual remarks. So how do you protect yourself? First, notice the pattern. If someone regularly undermines your memory or interpretation, pause and reflect. Write things down. Keep a record of events, conversations, and agreements. Tangible proof strengthens your confidence when your perception is challenged. Second, trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. You don't need external validation to confirm your reality every time someone throws doubt your way. Finally, set boundaries. Don't let repeated questioning or suggestions chip away at your confidence. Calmly assert your perspective. "I remember it this way, and I trust my memory." Confidence in your reality is the best defense against doubt-seeding. At the end of the day, doubt-seeding is subtle, silent, and often overlooked, but it's incredibly powerful. It doesn't yell or slam doors. It quietly infiltrates your mind, nudging you towards uncertainty. And once doubt takes root, manipulators can steer your decisions, emotions, and perceptions with ease. The good news is, awareness is the antidote. Once you recognize the tactic, you reclaim your reality. You realize just because someone tries to make you doubt yourself doesn't mean they're right. Your memory, your perception, your judgment, those belong to you, and no manipulator can take that away unless you let them.
Strategic helplessness. All right, let's talk about a manipulative tactic that is annoyingly common, but often flies under the radar. Strategic helplessness. This is when someone pretends they can't handle something, whether it's a task, a decision, or responsibility, just so someone else will step in and do it for them. On the surface, it looks like laziness or incompetence. But dig a little deeper, and it's usually a calculated move to offload work and guilt others into helping. Imagine this scenario. You're at work, and a colleague gets assigned a project. Instead of doing it, they keep saying, "Oh, I'm not sure I can figure this out. It seems too complicated." Every time a problem comes up, they act confused or overwhelmed, prompting you or someone else to jump in and fix it. At the end, they get the benefit, the task is completed, and you're left doing most of the heavy lifting. That's strategic helplessness in action. Why does it work so well? Because humans naturally want to help. We're wired to respond to signs of struggle. When someone acts helpless, our brains trigger a rescue response, a mix of empathy, social conditioning, and sometimes guilt. We step in, thinking we're doing the right thing, only to realize later that the person was playing us the whole time. It shows up everywhere: workplaces, friendships, families, even romantic relationships. In families, kids sometimes see parents using subtle strategic helplessness. "I can't figure out this form. Can you do it for me?" Or, "I'm too tired to cook tonight. Can you handle dinner?" At first, it feels harmless, but over time, it can become a pattern of emotional labor and dependency where one person is always helping because the other refuses to take responsibility. In romantic relationships, it can be even sneakier. One partner might constantly misplace things, forget how to do tasks, or claim they're overwhelmed by minor responsibilities. The other partner ends up doing the majority of the chores, planning, or decision-making. Strategic helplessness is subtle because it doesn't scream manipulation. It looks like someone struggling, being human, or needing support, all things we're taught to respond with care. Even in workplaces, this tactic can be disguised as humility. Think about a coworker who says, "I'm not good at presentations. Can you handle the slides?" Or, "I don't know how to run this report. Maybe you could do it." On the surface, it sounds like honesty. But repeated over time, it shifts the workload unfairly. That coworker isn't incompetent. They're deliberately creating the impression that they need you to step in. Why is this manipulative? Because it exploits your willingness to help while minimizing their effort and accountability. And here's the sneaky part. People often feel guilty if they don't step in. Your brain says, "I could help, so maybe I should." And that guilt is the weapon behind strategic helplessness. It makes you do the work without any real benefit to yourself, while the manipulator coasts along. So how do you spot it? Watch for patterns. Someone repeatedly can't handle tasks that are well within their ability. They seem to rely on your help more than is reasonable or fair. When you resist, they make you feel guilty for not helping. Once you recognize it, you can protect yourself without coming off as cold. Boundaries are your best friend. You don't have to rescue someone every time. A simple response works wonders. "I can help this once, but next time you'll need to handle it yourself." Over time, consistent boundaries teach them that pretending helplessness won't get them what they want.
Another trick is to encourage problem solving rather than doing it for them. Ask questions like, how do you think you could tackle this? Or what steps can you take to figure it out? That way, they're guided to responsibility without you carrying the full load. Strategic helplessness is everywhere because it works. It taps into empathy, guilt, and social conditioning, making us feel obligated to help. But here's the truth. Being human doesn't mean being a doormat. Your energy and time are yours. If someone keeps pretending they can't do something just to get you to act, that's manipulation, plain and simple. At the end of the day, recognizing strategic helplessness is empowering. Once you see it, you stop being an automatic rescuer. You reclaim your energy, your boundaries, and your time. The manipulator may keep pretending, but now you're wise to the game. And that, my friend, is how you win without burning out.
Manufactured jealousy. All right, let's talk about one of the sneakiest and emotionally exhausting manipulation tactics: manufactured jealousy. This is when someone deliberately creates feelings of rivalry, competition, or insecurity in order to control your attention, behavior, or emotions. Basically, they make you worry about something that doesn't even exist and use that worry to steer your actions. Imagine this. A partner casually mentions an attractive coworker, a flirty friend, or someone they had a fun chat with, all in a casual, offhand way. The goal isn't transparency, it's control. By planting a little seed of jealousy, they make you anxious, alert, and hyper-aware of your own behavior. Suddenly, you're trying harder to earn their approval, monitoring your actions, or even changing your routines, all because they want to see how much power they have over your emotional reactions. This tactic works so well because humans are wired to protect social bonds. From an evolutionary perspective, attention, affection, and loyalty mattered for survival. If someone signals that your place in a relationship or group is threatened, your brain responds with urgency. Manipulators exploit this by manufacturing the threat, even if there's no real danger. It doesn't stop at romantic relationships. Friends, siblings, co-workers, even social media interactions can trigger manufactured jealousy. A coworker might casually hint that someone else is vying for your promotion, or a friend might suggest that others are having more fun without you. The result? You suddenly overcompensate, proving your loyalty or value, all while the manipulator quietly enjoys the control. Here's the kicker. It's usually subtle. Unlike outright accusations or confrontations, manufactured jealousy relies on insinuation, tone, and timing. It's the little comments that get under your skin, like, "So-and-so said they had a great time hanging out with me yesterday. I think you'd get along better with this person than with me. I can't believe they remembered that about me. Wow." Each comment is carefully placed to spark insecurity or fear without ever being overt. And once your emotions are triggered, the manipulator can guide your behavior. Maybe you text more, compliment more, or bend over backward to prove yourself, all while they sit back and watch the subtle chaos unfold. It's especially powerful because it keeps you focused on them. Instead of enjoying your own life or making independent decisions, your attention is hijacked. You're constantly wondering, am I enough? Are they paying attention to me? And this hyper-awareness is exactly what the manipulator wants. They're not necessarily interested in a real rival. They're interested in how you respond. Even worse, it often feels like your fault. You think, I shouldn't feel this way, but I can't help it. That guilt reinforces the manipulator's power. You're stuck in a loop of trying to manage your feelings, proving your worth, and worrying about a threat they may have created from thin air. So, how do you protect yourself? First, recognize the pattern. Notice when someone consistently drops hints designed to make you feel insecure or competitive without any real reason. Second, check the facts. Ask yourself, is there really a rival, or am I reacting to a suggestion? Often, there isn't a real threat. Third, maintain boundaries. Don't let manufactured jealousy dictate your emotions or actions. Your attention and energy are yours to manage. You can care about someone without letting subtle manipulations control your behavior. A calm, reflective response, or even ignoring the intended trigger, strips the tactic of power. Finally, remind yourself that your worth isn't negotiable. Someone trying to manufacture jealousy is testing your reactions, not evaluating you. Their goal is control, not genuine connection. Recognizing that disconnect can free you from the emotional trap. At the end of the day, manufactured jealousy is an emotional game. It's subtle, invisible to most people, and incredibly effective at steering attention and behavior. But once you spot it, the power shifts back to you. You decide where your focus goes, who gets your energy, and how you react. You don't have to dance to someone else's jealousy strings. The trick is simple: awareness, boundaries, and trust in your own emotional judgment. Once you master those, no manipulator can create rivalry where there is none, and your life stays yours.
Conditional kindness. Let's dive into a manipulation tactic that feels especially painful because it twists something we naturally crave: kindness. This one's called conditional kindness, and it's exactly what it sounds like. Someone gives you affection, praise, or approval, but only if you do what they want. If you resist or act independently, the kindness disappears. Imagine this: a partner showers you with attention, gifts, or compliments, but only after you agree with them, change your plans, or do something they asked. Step out of line, suddenly the affection dries up. The warmth you thought was genuine now feels like a weapon. Conditional kindness trains you to chase approval instead of feeling secure in the relationship itself. This tactic works because humans are wired to seek social reward. From childhood, we learned that love, praise, and acceptance often come after good behavior. Manipulators exploit that instinct by making affection a transaction rather than a given. You start associating their kindness with obedience. In other words, if I want to feel cared for,
I have to do what they want. It's everywhere, and it's subtle. In workplaces, a boss might lavish praise when you work overtime or follow their exact instructions, but withhold it if you question their decisions. At home, a parent might say, "I'm proud of you," but only when you achieve what I expect. Friends can do it too, offering support and inclusion only when you bend to their wishes. The emotional toll is sneaky. Over time, you stop trusting your own desires and instincts. You start prioritizing someone else's happiness over your own, constantly checking if your actions will earn approval. That internal calculation can be exhausting, confusing, and damaging to self-esteem. Here's a clear example. A partner might say, "I only feel close to you when you agree with me. Otherwise, I don't know if I can be affectionate." Notice how that statement isn't just a preference, it's control disguised as care. The implied threat is, if you don't comply, you lose love. Conditional kindness is especially effective because it hits two psychological triggers: reward and fear of loss. You get a hit of positive reinforcement when you comply and anxiety when you resist. The cycle is addictive. You end up constantly chasing approval, just like someone addicted to a reward system. And the trickiest part, it often feels like love or friendship. At first, the kindness seems genuine, which makes it even harder to spot. It's only over time that you notice the pattern. Affection comes with strings attached. That's when you realize it's not just behavior, it's manipulation. So, how do you spot conditional kindness? Watch for these red flags. Affection, praise, or approval disappears when you act independently or disagree. The person makes you feel guilty for having boundaries or pursuing your own needs. Positive treatment feels transactional rather than unconditional. Once you recognize it, the best defense is self-awareness and boundaries. Remind yourself that kindness should not feel like a weapon. You deserve love, respect, and support, regardless of whether you comply with someone else's demands. Practice asserting yourself calmly. "I appreciate your support, but I will make my own decision." It helps to mentally separate the behavior from your self-worth. Conditional kindness manipulates your emotions, not your value. You don't need to earn kindness. Real relationships provide it naturally, without hidden agendas. At the end of the day, conditional kindness is all about control disguised as generosity. It exploits your craving for approval and security, keeping you tethered to someone else's rules. But the moment you recognize the pattern and reclaim your boundaries, their power diminishes. You can still engage with the person, but now you do it on your own terms, and your sense of self stays intact. Remember, true kindness doesn't come with strings. If someone's affection depends on obedience, that's not love, respect, or friendship. It's manipulation. Recognize it, set boundaries, and protect your emotional freedom. That's the real power move. Silent punishment. All right, let's talk about a manipulation tactic that's deceptively simple but emotionally brutal. Silent punishment. You might know it by other names: the silent treatment, stonewalling, or cold shoulder, but the effect is the same. Someone intentionally withdraws affection, communication, or attention to make you feel guilty, anxious, or desperate. Imagine this. You did something minor, maybe even unintentional, and instead of talking about it, the other person stops responding. No texts, no conversation, no acknowledgement. Days pass and you're left guessing, did I do something wrong? How do I fix this? That uncertainty creates emotional pressure. The manipulator doesn't need to say a word. Their silence speaks volumes, and it's all aimed at controlling your behavior. Silent punishment works because humans are wired for social connection. We naturally want acceptance, reassurance, and validation. When someone we care about withdraws those things, it triggers discomfort, anxiety, and even self-doubt. Manipulators exploit this instinct, using absence as a tool to bend others to their will. It's not just personal relationships either. In the workplace, a boss might ignore your emails or avoid meetings to signal disapproval without addressing the actual issue. Friends might give you the cold shoulder to make you feel guilty or to push you into apologizing. Even in families, parents sometimes use silent punishment to reinforce compliance or discourage behaviors they dislike. Here's why it's so effective. It bypasses rational conversation. Instead of discussing a problem openly, manipulators weaponize your emotions. You feel pressured to reconcile, apologize, or overcompensate, all without any actual dialogue about the real issue. That emotional tension keeps you focused on the manipulator's terms rather than your own needs. A classic example: a partner gets annoyed over something minor and goes completely silent for days. You replay every interaction in your head, second-guess your actions, and perhaps even apologize for things you didn't do. All the while, they maintain power without ever explicitly stating a complaint. You're left chasing peace, and they're controlling the narrative silently. Silent punishment is often paired with other manipulative tactics, like conditional kindness or emotional Russian roulette. First, the manipulator withdraws attention. Then, they reward you with affection when you act how they want, conditional kindness. Over time, this creates an addictive cycle. Emotional distress followed by relief, keeping you hooked and compliant. So how do you spot it? Watch for patterns. Long periods of unexplained silence or coldness following minor conflicts. Emotional withdrawal used as a punishment rather than a break to cool off. You feel anxious, guilty, or desperate to fix the situation, even when no logical reason exists. Dealing with silent punishment is tricky, but awareness is your first defense. Recognize that silence is being used as a tool, not as a neutral response. Don't internalize it as your fault. Your feelings are valid, and you don't have to earn attention or affection through guilt. Setting boundaries is key. Calmly communicating that withdrawal of communication is not acceptable can reduce its power. For example, I won't engage when you use silence as punishment. I'm happy to talk when we can communicate respectfully. By calling it out, you strip the tactic of its stealth and reclaim some control. Also, detach emotionally. Don't let the silence dominate your thoughts. Focus on your own routines, responsibilities, and self-care rather than obsessing over the manipulator's reaction. Their power only exists if you let it. Silent punishment is painful because it exploits your need for connection and triggers fear of rejection. But remember, healthy relationships involve communication, not control through absence.
Recognizing this behavior early helps you protect your emotional well-being and prevents you from being trapped in cycles of manipulation. At the end of the day, silence is only powerful when it causes you to overthink, guilt yourself, or bend to someone else's will. By staying grounded in your own perspective, maintaining boundaries, and refusing to be controlled by absence, you take back the emotional space they tried to claim.
Moral leveraging. This is when someone uses your own values, principles, or sense of right and wrong to pressure you into doing what they want. Basically, they twist your morality against you. Think about it. Most people want to do the right thing. We care about fairness, honesty, kindness, and loyalty. Manipulators know this, and they use it to create pressure. Instead of asking directly, they frame requests so that refusing makes you feel morally deficient. Here's a classic example. A coworker says, "If you really cared about the team, you'd stay late and finish this project for me." Notice how they're not just asking for help. They're implying that saying no would make you selfish, uncaring, or morally wrong. Even though staying late might be inconvenient or outside your responsibility, the guilt hits hard because it attacks your self-image. It's everywhere. In relationships, a partner might say, "If you loved me, you'd do this for me." Anyone who really cared about me would notice this. Friends use it too. "If you were a true friend, you'd come with me to support them." Even strangers can deploy it subtly. Charity campaigns, social media posts, or fundraisers often use moral leveraging to pressure action with guilt-laden messaging. The power of moral leveraging comes from internal conflict. When someone appeals to your values, you don't just weigh the request rationally, you also weigh your identity and self-worth. You start thinking, am I a bad person if I say no? Am I failing my values? That self-questioning creates leverage without overt threats or force. It's especially insidious because it often masquerades as a reminder or suggestion, not manipulation. A phrase like, "I know you care about the environment, shouldn't you do this?" sounds innocent, but it subtly pressures you into acting to avoid moral discomfort, even if the action isn't necessary or in your interest. And here's the kicker. Manipulators often know your core values intimately. They've observed what you care about, what motivates you, and what you're sensitive to. Then they craft statements that tie their requests directly to your sense of morality, making refusal feel like a character flaw. So how do you spot it? Watch for phrases that tie actions to your self-worth or moral integrity. "If you really cared," or "loved," or "were loyal," "a good person would," "anyone with integrity would." Once you recognize it, the key is separating the manipulation from your values. Just because someone frames something as a moral imperative doesn't mean it actually is. You can honor your values while staying true to your principles. For example, politely refusing while staying true to your principles. "I care about the team, but I also need to finish my own responsibilities." Another tool is reframing the request. Instead of internalizing guilt, evaluate it objectively. Is this request reasonable? Does saying no actually conflict with my values, Or is someone trying to pressure me? That mental check strips moral leveraging of its emotional power. Moral leveraging is everywhere because it works. It's elegant and subtle. You don't feel forced, but just guilty or self-conscious. Over time, if unrecognized, it can chip away at confidence and autonomy. You start overthinking every decision, trying to avoid moral failure in someone else's eyes. At its core, moral leveraging preys on empathy, self-concept, and integrity, but awareness is a shield. Once you notice the tactic, you can honor your principles without succumbing to someone else's emotional pressure. Your values stay intact, and you stop letting guilt dictate your choices. Remember, real respect doesn't coerce you through morality. It allows space for independent decisions while trusting your integrity. Anyone who pressures you with guilt-based morality is using manipulation. And now you know exactly what to do about it.
Fear anchoring. All right, let's dive into a manipulation tactic that messes with your decision-making without you even realizing it. Fear anchoring. This is when someone subtly links every option you consider with a hidden threat or negative outcome, making it almost impossible to make a choice without anxiety. Basically, they anchor your mind to fear so they can steer your behavior. Imagine this scenario. A manager tells you, "If we don't finish this project perfectly, you could lose your spot on the team." Then they add, "And if you ask for help, it might look like you're incompetent." Suddenly, every action you consider has a danger attached. You're constantly balancing potential risks that they planted, not ones that actually exist. That's fear anchoring. This tactic works because humans are hardwired to avoid threats. Our brains are more sensitive to potential danger than opportunity. It's called the negativity bias. Manipulators exploit this bias, planting subtle threats or what-if scenarios so your brain focuses on risk rather than rational evaluation. In other words, you're mentally stuck in a panic loop while they quietly guide your decisions. Fear anchoring shows up in many situations. At work, a boss might imply, "If we don't meet this goal, upper management will notice your mistakes. I hope you understand the consequences of falling behind." In personal relationships, it can be like, "If you don't agree with me, things could get awkward, or we might drift apart. I just don't know if you'll ever understand me if you do that." Even marketing and sales use fear anchoring. Think of ads saying, "Don't miss this deal, prices could skyrocket tomorrow," or "Your home might be at risk if you don't act now." Every option is tied to a negative consequence, creating urgency and anxiety. Here's why it's so effective. Fear hijacks your decision-making system. Instead of weighing pros and cons calmly, your brain focuses on avoiding the anchored threat. You become more compliant, cautious, or dependent on the manipulator's guidance. And often, you don't even notice it's happening. You just feel anxious, pressured, or cornered. A classic example in daily life, someone keeps hinting that if you don't act a certain way, something bad might happen. "I'm not saying you'll get in trouble, but it could cause problems." That little seed of doubt triggers fear. Even when you logically know the threat is unlikely, your emotions are already in overdrive, pushing you toward the manipulator's preferred choice. So how do you spot fear anchoring? Watch for phrases or scenarios that imply danger, failure, or loss with every choice you make. Make you second-guess your instincts or judgment. Encourage compliance through anxiety rather than reason. Once you recognize it, the first defense is awareness. Realize the fear is being planted strategically. Ask yourself, is this threat real or am I being manipulated? Often the answer is the latter. Next, detach emotionally. Step back and evaluate your options logically, ignoring the anchored consequences the manipulator suggested. Write down the actual risks versus the suggested ones. This helps your brain separate realistic threats from emotional manipulation. Finally, set boundaries. You don't have to make choices under fear. Calmly assert your independence. I understand the risks you mentioned, but I'll decide based on what I think is reasonable. By doing this, you strip the tactic of power and regain control over your decisions. Fear anchoring is powerful because it hijacks your natural survival instincts and turns them into a tool for manipulation. But once you're aware of it, you can recognize the artificial threats, manage your emotional response, and make rational decisions without being pressured. At the end of the day, manipulators love fear because it's a shortcut to compliance. But fear only has power if you let it dictate your choices. By identifying it, analyzing it logically, and keeping your boundaries firm, you reclaim your freedom, and the manipulator's anchor loses its hold.
Gaslight by Metrics. All right, let's dive into a manipulation tactic that looks totally logical on the surface, but is really a sneaky way to undermine your perception. Gaslight by Metrics. This is when someone uses numbers, statistics, or data to make you doubt your feelings, experiences, or complaints, even if those numbers are misleading, cherry-picked, or meaningless. Imagine this. You raise a legitimate concern at work about being overburdened with tasks. Instead of addressing it, your manager says, "Actually, according to the reports, you're underperforming compared to last month, so it's clearly not a workload issue." Suddenly, you're questioning yourself. Am I overreacting? Is it really that bad? That's gaslighting via metrics. Numbers are presented as undeniable truth, even if they're irrelevant or manipulated to suit the manipulator's agenda. This works because humans naturally trust data. We think numbers are objective, unbiased, and factual. Manipulators exploit that trust using stats as a weapon. Instead of addressing emotions, fairness, or logic, they pivot to something quantifiable, often twisting it so it supports their version of reality. Suddenly, your feelings are wrong because they don't match the numbers. It happens everywhere. At work, bosses might manipulate KPIs, productivity stats, or performance dashboards to make employees feel inadequate. In personal relationships, a partner could cite financial numbers, household chores, or social interactions to imply you're not contributing enough, ignoring context or effort. Even in social or political discussions, people often present selective data to make others doubt their judgment, feelings, or experiences. Here's why it's so effective. It combines two powerful psychological effects. Authority of numbers. We assume math is objective and precise. If someone uses numbers, we often defer to their proof. And self-doubt. When confronted with data that contradicts our perspective, we start questioning our memory, perception, or fairness. A classic example in the workplace: imagine you repeatedly tell your manager that a project is under-resourced. They respond with, "Actually, our metrics show your team is performing above average compared to other departments." On paper, that sounds impressive, but it sidesteps the core issue: workload imbalance. You're left doubting your concerns even though your feelings and observations were valid. It's also common in online debates. Someone might say, "According to this chart, X is happening less than you think, so your worry is unnecessary." The data may be selectively chosen, misleading, or missing context, but the emotional effect is the same. You feel wrong for trusting your own observations. So, how do you spot gaslighting by metrics? Look for patterns. Numbers are used to dismiss or invalidate feelings instead of informed decisions. Data seems cherry-picked, overly simplified, or ignores context. The goal is emotional manipulation rather than problem-solving. Once you recognize it, take a step back. Remember that data is only as good as the context and intent behind it. Just because someone presents numbers doesn't mean your experience is invalid. Analyze the metrics critically. What's missing? Who collected it? What story does it leave out? Another tactic is to reframe the conversation. Instead of debating numbers emotionally, bring the discussion back to real-world experience and fairness. The data may say that, but in practice, our team is still stretched too thin. Let's address the workload instead of focusing solely on numbers. This puts the emphasis on reality rather than manipulated statistics. Gaslighting by metrics is clever because it hides manipulation behind a veil of objectivity. You feel wrong or irrational, not because you are, but because numbers are being misused to make you doubt yourself. Awareness is key. Once you realize the tactic, you can separate emotion from misrepresented data, maintain confidence in your observations, and prevent manipulators from twisting statistics against you. At the end of the day, numbers can't speak for reality unless they're used honestly. Don't let anyone weaponize metrics to undermine your judgment or feelings. Question the context, examine the intent, and trust your experience. Because manipulated data is powerful, but awareness is stronger.
Policy shielding. Let's dive into a manipulation tactic that's sneaky because it dresses unethical behavior in the guise of rules and authority. Policy shielding is when someone deflects responsibility, criticism, or accountability by saying, "I can't do anything about it,"
it's company policy. Or, that's just how it's done here. On the surface, it sounds neutral, logical, even justified. But in reality, it often protects behavior that's unfair, unethical, or manipulative. Imagine this scenario. You notice a coworker being treated unfairly, maybe overlooked for promotions or blamed for mistakes they didn't make. When you bring it up, the manager shrugs and says, "I'm sorry, it's just company policy." Suddenly, the unethical behavior feels untouchable. The policy isn't questioned, and accountability disappears. The manipulator hides behind the rules while continuing to benefit from the unfair system. Policy shielding works because humans are conditioned to respect authority and rules. Most of us assume policies exist for fairness or legal reasons. When someone invokes policy as a shield, it discourages questioning. Challenging it feels rebellious or risky, so we often back down instead of pushing for justice. It shows up in all sorts of environments. At work, it might be, "I can't give you that raise. It's against company policy." "We can't change your schedule. Policy doesn't allow it." In customer service, it's classic. "I'm sorry, I can't refund this item. It's company policy." Even if the denial seems unreasonable, invoking policy makes it feel untouchable. In personal relationships, it can appear as family rules, social expectations, or traditions being used to justify unfair treatment. Here's why it's manipulative. It turns neutral-sounding rules into weapons. By claiming, "I can't do anything," the manipulator avoids accountability and discourages resistance. The real effect, you feel trapped, powerless, or like the situation is immutable. Even when the policy is arbitrary or open to interpretation, the statement discourages you from questioning it. Policy shielding often pairs with fear of reprisal. People hesitate to push back because the authority figure can always say, "I'm just following the rules." That combination of perceived power and inflexible rules creates a strong psychological barrier. You comply, not necessarily because the rule is fair, but because challenging it feels dangerous or futile. A classic example in workplaces. HR uses policy to enforce decisions that benefit management while appearing neutral. Someone questions inequality treatment or harassment, and HR responds, "We follow standard procedures, so nothing can be done." This doesn't just protect the perpetrator, it manipulates the victim into thinking their complaint is invalid or that challenging the system is pointless. So how do you spot it? Watch for these signs. Rules or policies are invoked inconsistently, only when convenient to protect the manipulator. Accountability is avoided under the guise of following the rules. The policy serves the interests of one party while restricting others unfairly. Once you recognize policy shielding, the key is critical thinking and advocacy. Don't accept every rule as absolute. Ask, who created this policy? What's its purpose? Does it apply fairly? Document inconsistencies, and if possible, appeal to higher authority or independent guidelines. Often rules are flexible, but manipulators rely on the assumption that you won't question them. Another strategy is reframing the conversation. Instead of arguing with the policy itself, focus on principles and fairness. Even within company rules, this seems inequitable. How can we address it? By doing this, you shift the discussion from blind obedience to ethical reasoning. Policy shielding is powerful because it makes the manipulator appear impartial while silencing criticism, but it only works if you accept the rule as absolute. Awareness, questioning, and documentation are your defenses. You don't have to break rules to challenge abuse. You just need to separate the manipulator from the policy they hide behind. At the end of the day, remember, rules exist to serve fairness, not to protect unethical behavior. Anyone using its policy as a shield is hiding behind a system, not creating one. Spot it, question it, and reclaim your power, because no policy should make manipulation untouchable.
False urgency in work. Let's dive into a manipulation tactic that's super common in workplaces, but rarely called out. False urgency in work. This is when managers or leaders assign deadlines that are intentionally unrealistic, creating a constant sense of pressure and stress. The goal? To keep employees submissive, anxious, and easier to control. Think about it. You're given a project due tomorrow that realistically would take a week to complete. Your brain immediately goes into overdrive. Stress hormones spike, you start skipping breaks, cutting corners, or working late. The manipulator doesn't care about the project itself. They care about how you react under pressure. They've just created a scenario where you feel compelled to comply and scramble because the timeline feels urgent. This tactic works because humans are wired to respond to immediate threats and deadlines. When time is running out, our rational thinking decreases, stress increases, and we focus more on survival or appeasement rather than questioning the fairness of the request. False urgency hijacks that natural response. You see this everywhere. In offices, managers give last-minute deadlines that could have been scheduled more realistically. In retail or service industries, employees are told, "This must be done today, no exceptions," even if it's unnecessary. In creative or academic settings, projects are stacked with overlapping urgent deadlines to test compliance and resilience. The emotional impact is subtle but severe. Over time, workers start to feel helpless, exhausted, and constantly behind. They're always chasing deadlines, even if the original goals were arbitrary. The manipulator gains control not through direct commands, but through structured stress. False urgency is often paired with other manipulative tactics, like conditional praise or fear anchoring. Employees who meet the impossible deadlines are praised as dedicated or exceptional, reinforcing compliance. Those who resist or push back are subtly threatened or made to feel guilty, increasing submission. Here's a classic example. Imagine a manager assigns a report due by 5 p.m. today, knowing it would realistically take 3 days. You scramble, skip lunch, and stay late to finish it. When you deliver, they say, "Great job meeting the tight deadline," framing it as your exceptional commitment rather than a systemic problem. Over time, you internalize that stress and compliance are rewarded, while resistance is punished. False urgency also distorts priorities. When everything feels urgent, nothing truly is. Employees spend all their energy reacting to fires instead of focusing on important, meaningful work. The manipulator benefits because they maintain a reactive, distracted workforce that's easier to guide and control. So how do you spot it? Watch for these patterns. Deadlines that are consistently unrealistic or unnecessarily tight. pressure tactics disguised as urgency rather than genuine necessity. Praise or punishment tied to compliance with arbitrary timelines rather than quality outcomes. Once you recognize it, the key is time and expectation management. Document what's realistic and push back respectfully. Given the complexity, this realistically requires 3 days. Can we adjust priorities? Even if the manipulator resists, you're establishing boundaries and showing that urgency is artificial. Another tactic is strategic communication. Break larger tasks into manageable parts and clarify what can reasonably be achieved. This gives you control over your workload and reduces the manipulator's power to create stress arbitrarily. False urgency works because it exploits stress and compliance instincts. It's subtle, often framed as necessity or high standards, and makes employees doubt themselves if they resist. But awareness is powerful. By recognizing artificial urgency, setting boundaries, and managing your response, you protect your energy, sanity, and decision-making. At the end of the day, real deadlines serve purpose, not control. Anyone using impossible timelines to dominate or stress you is manipulating your natural response to pressure. Spot it, challenge it, and reclaim control over your work. Because your time and energy aren't tools for someone else's power play.
Micro-approval control. All right, let's talk about a subtle but incredibly effective manipulation tactic, micro-approval control. This is when someone deliberately withholds minor approvals, validation, or acknowledgement to keep you dependent, anxious, or constantly seeking their favor. It's the art of controlling someone not with overt pressure, but through tiny, calculated nudges. Think about it. You complete a task, share an idea, or make a suggestion, and the response is nothing. No praise, no acknowledgement, no feedback. Just silence. Or maybe a slight nod or vague comment. Over time, your brain starts craving that small signal. Did I do it right? Do they approve? And that craving keeps you tuned into the manipulator's behavior. Micro-approval control works because humans are wired for social feedback. From childhood, we learn to seek validation from authority figures or peers. Praise, acknowledgement, and even minor approvals release feel-good chemicals like dopamine. Manipulators exploit this by selectively giving or withholding approval, creating a subtle but constant pull on your emotions. You see this tactic in many settings. At work, a manager might respond vaguely to emails or ideas, giving praise only occasionally to keep you striving for recognition. In romantic relationships, a partner might only acknowledge small gestures intermittently, keeping you constantly earning affection. Even in friendships or social groups, people use selective approval to maintain influence or control over behavior. Here's why it's powerful. It's low-key but addictive. Unlike overt criticism, which triggers immediate defense, micro-approval control subtly shapes behavior over time. You start monitoring yourself, adjusting your actions, and overthinking your performance
all to get those small approvals. And the manipulator? They hardly have to say a word. Their power comes from the anticipation and uncertainty. A classic example. Imagine submitting a report at work. The manager doesn't acknowledge it at first. You wonder if it's good enough. Later, they casually say, nice effort, but without detail. You instantly feel relief and a boost of motivation to perform better next time, hoping for more recognition. That tiny approval keeps you engaged and compliant without any direct command. Micro-approval control often pairs with other manipulative tactics, like false urgency or conditional kindness. The manipulator creates a cycle: withhold approval, trigger anxiety or effort, give tiny praise, reinforce behavior. Over time, you're conditioned to seek their validation constantly. So how do you spot it? Look for patterns. Minor approvals, praise, or feedback are inconsistent and strategically timed. You feel anxious or on edge, constantly seeking acknowledgement. Your self-esteem or motivation starts relying on external validation rather than internal confidence. Once recognized, the first defense is self-validation. Remind yourself that your work, actions, and value aren't determined by someone else's approval. Cultivate independent feedback loops. Check your work against standards, goals, or personal benchmarks rather than waiting for permission to feel competent. Next, set boundaries. You can respond to micro-approval control calmly. I've completed this task according to our goals. I'll move forward unless you have specific feedback. By asserting independence, you reduce the manipulator's ability to influence you through small, selective signals. Finally, focus on internal motivation. When your sense of worth and performance comes from yourself instead of intermittent approval, micro-approval control loses its power. The manipulator may still attempt to influence you, but you're no longer hooked by anticipation or validation seeking. Micro-approval control is clever because it doesn't scream manipulation. It's subtle, slow, and invisible to outsiders. Yet its effect is profound. People gradually surrender autonomy, energy, and confidence, all while thinking they're just trying harder to succeed or please. At the end of the day, approval should feel earned, not withheld as leverage. Recognizing micro-approval control, trusting your own judgment, and focusing on intrinsic validation breaks the manipulator's hold. Your energy, confidence, and decisions belong to you.
Selective praise politics. All right, let's dive into a manipulation tactic that's both subtle and toxic. Selective praise politics. This is when someone deliberately rewards, compliments, or elevates only the people who align with them or follow their agenda, while ignoring, sidelining, or subtly undermining those who challenge them. The goal? To create division, loyalty, and control. Think about it. In a team or social group, some people get constant praise, recognition, or opportunities, while others feel invisible, dismissed, or criticized, not because of performance, but because of loyalty. Over time, this creates a hierarchy of favor, where compliance is rewarded and dissent is penalized, often in ways that feel indirect or justified. This tactic works because humans crave recognition and belonging.
Praise is more than just a compliment. It's a signal of social acceptance and approval. By controlling who receives it, the manipulator subtly nudges people toward obedience and alignment. Meanwhile, those outside the inner circle feel insecure, anxious, or alienated. You see this everywhere. At work, a manager praises only employees who toe the line or agree with their decisions, leaving others feeling undervalued despite equal or better performance. In politics or organizations, leaders highlight loyalists publicly while quietly ignoring or criticizing opposition members. Even in social circles or families, favoritism can isolate certain members while elevating others, shaping group behavior without overt confrontation. This tactic is effective because it plays on fear, ambition, and belonging simultaneously. People naturally want approval and opportunities. When selective praise is used as a tool, individuals are motivated to conform, stay loyal, or avoid challenging authority, just to maintain favor. Those outside the favored circle often self-censor, withdraw, or overcompensate, which further entrenches the manipulator's control. A classic example. Imagine a team meeting where the manager praises two employees for their work while quietly ignoring another who contributed equally. The unpraised employee starts second-guessing their efforts, thinking, "Am I doing something wrong? Maybe I should align more closely with the manager's preferences." Meanwhile, the praised employees feel rewarded and are subtly reinforced to stay compliant. The result? Division and control without ever openly criticizing anyone. Selective praise politics often pairs with other tactics like micro-approval control or conditional kindness. By praising loyalists and withholding acknowledgement from others, manipulators create a power hierarchy that incentivizes obedience and discourages dissent. Over time, people internalize the manipulator's agenda, thinking approval is earned only through alignment rather than genuine merit. So, how do you spot it? Look for patterns. Praise, recognition, or rewards are unevenly distributed based on loyalty or agreement, not performance. Group members self-censor or adjust behavior to gain favor rather than focus on actual outcomes. Dissenting voices feel isolated, ignored, or subtly undermined over time. Once recognized, the key defense is maintaining self-worth and independence. Understand that lack of praise does not equal lack of value or ability. Document your contributions and seek feedback from reliable, impartial sources if possible. Rely on internal metrics and personal standards rather than manipulator-driven approval. Another tactic is strategic observation. By recognizing patterns of favoritism, you can anticipate manipulative behavior, protect your autonomy, and avoid getting drawn into loyalty games. In professional settings, networking with multiple peers or mentors outside the manipulated circle can provide support and perspective. Selective praise politics is powerful because it's subtle and socially ingrained. People often blame themselves for being undervalued, while the manipulator quietly controls the group dynamic. Awareness is critical. Once you see the pattern, you can detach emotionally, focus on your own goals, and avoid being trapped in their hierarchy of approval. At the end of the day, praise should reflect genuine merit, not loyalty to someone's agenda. Recognizing selective praise, maintaining self-worth, and prioritizing authentic feedback over manipulative recognition protects your autonomy and keeps you from being a pawn in someone else's power game.
The moving goalpost. All right, let's talk about a manipulation tactic that's incredibly frustrating and mentally exhausting. The moving goalpost. This is when someone continuously shifts expectations, criteria, or standards so that no matter how well you perform, it never feels like it's enough. The goal? To keep people insecure, overworked, and constantly striving without satisfaction. Imagine this scenario. You complete a project exactly as instructed. You feel proud of your work, but then your manager says, actually, we need it done differently. Or, next time I want it done faster with more detail and a different approach. No matter how hard you try, the requirements seem to evolve faster than you can adapt. That's the moving goalpost in action. It's a subtle but highly effective form of control. This tactic works because humans naturally seek achievement and approval. When you perform well, it feels rewarding. But when expectations shift just out of reach, you never get that sense of accomplishment. You start self-doubting, thinking, am I doing something wrong? Why is it never enough? That self-doubt keeps you compliant, anxious, and more willing to work harder, even when it's unreasonable. You see it everywhere. At work, managers constantly change deadlines, project requirements, or evaluation criteria. In personal relationships, a partner might praise you one day, then criticize you for failing to meet unspoken standards the next. Even in education or sports, teachers or coaches may adjust grading or performance metrics to ensure students or athletes feel perpetually inadequate. Here's why it's so effective. It preys on insecurity and perfectionism. Once you internalize that you can never win, you're more likely to overextend yourself, overthink decisions, and constantly seek approval. The manipulator gains power without needing to overtly criticize you. The moving target does the work for them. A classic example in workplaces. You meet your quarterly targets exactly as outlined. Instead of acknowledging it, your boss says, "Good, but next quarter I need 20% more and I want you to do it using a new software we haven't trained you on yet." Suddenly, your achievements feel inadequate, your stress levels rise, and you're scrambling to meet the next evolving target. The sense of accomplishment is replaced by anxiety, and your compliance increases. The moving goalpost often pairs with other tactics like selective praise politics or false urgency. Praise or recognition is given when a goal is momentarily met, but just as quickly the standards shift. Deadlines, expectations, and rules change in ways that make resistance feel futile. Over time, this leads to burnout and emotional dependence on the manipulator's approval. So, how do you spot it? Watch for patterns. Goals, standards, or expectations change frequently without clear rationale. Achievement is rarely acknowledged for long before new requirements appear. You feel insecure, anxious, or like your best effort is never enough, even when objective measures suggest otherwise. Once recognized, the first defense is documentation. Keep records of instructions, deadlines, and communications. This provides evidence of shifting expectations and protects you from unfair blame. Next, clarify goals explicitly. Ask for measurable, fixed criteria for tasks or projects. Like, can you confirm exactly what the deliverables are and the deadline so I can ensure they're met? By getting concrete expectations in writing, you limit the manipulator's ability to arbitrarily shift the target. Finally, manage your emotional response. Accept that some changes are unavoidable, but don't internalize them as personal failure. Your worth isn't defined by constantly moving standards. Focus on your effort, consistency, and integrity rather than trying to chase impossible shifting goals. The moving goalpost is subtle but devastating because it attacks your sense of competence and control. It's often invisible to outsiders, making it easy for manipulators to continue the cycle unnoticed. Awareness is your first defense. By spotting the tactic, documenting expectations, and maintaining confidence in your abilities, you can resist the manipulator's attempt to keep you perpetually insecure. At the end of the day, clear goals, fair standards, and acknowledgement of genuine achievement are hallmarks of healthy systems, not manipulative environments.
Recognizing the moving goalpost protects your sanity, energy, and self-worth, even in the face of constantly changing expectations.
Invisible debt. All right, let's dive into manipulation tactic that's subtle but psychologically draining. Invisible debt. This is when someone does a single favor for you, or even just appears to, and then frames it in a way that makes you feel like you now owe them forever. The debt is invisible because it isn't documented or agreed upon, but emotionally, it feels heavy and binding. Think about it. A colleague covers a small task for you and casually says, "Remember, I helped you out last week." Or a friend once lent you money, and now every request feels tied to that single favor. You start thinking, "I owe them. I can't say no. I have to comply." That's invisible debt at work. The manipulator relies on your sense of obligation to get repeated compliance without overt demands. This tactic works because humans are wired for reciprocity. When someone does something nice, we naturally feel inclined to return the favor. Manipulators weaponize this instinct, extending a tiny act into a lifetime of perceived obligation. The more they subtly remind you, the heavier the debt feels. Over time, you might start overextending yourself just to stay out of perceived guilt, even when the original favor was small or unnecessary. You see invisible debt in many situations. In workplaces, a manager does a small favor, like covering your shift, and later references it to justify extra work or compliance. In friendships or family, someone helps you once and later frames it as a reason you must support their every request. In relationships, a partner may do a kind act and then subtly manipulate your choices. "I did this for you, so surely you can do that for me." Here's why it's so effective. The emotional weight is internalized, not enforced. Unlike overt demands, there's no explicit command. You comply because you feel morally bound, not because someone is threatening you. That internalized obligation can affect decisions, energy, and even self-esteem, making you anxious, guilt-ridden, and compliant without noticing the manipulation. A classic example, a coworker buys you coffee one morning and later repeatedly references it. "Remember that coffee I got you? I hope you can cover for me during the meeting today." The original gesture was harmless, but by reminding you, they create an invisible ledger where you are in debt and pressured to comply repeatedly. Invisible debt often pairs with other tactics like Ben Franklin effect abuse or moral leveraging. The manipulator creates a cycle: give a favor, highlight it subtly, extract compliance, repeat. Over time, you may feel like every action you take is measured against what you owe, eroding autonomy and fostering dependence. So how do you spot it? Look for patterns. Small favors are referenced repeatedly to justify unrelated requests. You feel uneasy or guilty about saying no, even when the favor is minor or old. Compliance feels emotionally compulsory rather than a free choice. Once recognized, the first defense is awareness and mental accounting.
Recognize the favor for what it is, a small act, not a lifetime contract. You can appreciate it without feeling bound to endless compliance. Next, set clear boundaries. Politely but firmly decline requests that go beyond reason. I appreciate what you did last time, but I can't commit to that now. You're acknowledging the act without letting it become a lever of control. Another key strategy is decoupling guilt from obligation. Remember, you don't owe someone your energy, time, or choices simply because they were nice ones. True reciprocity is voluntary, not enforced by guilt. Invisible debt is powerful because it exploits social norms, reciprocity, gratitude, and politeness, turning them into emotional chains. But once you recognize the tactic, you can maintain boundaries, assert independence, and make choices without guilt, protecting both your time and your mental space. At the end of the day, favors should create goodwill, not lifelong pressure. Recognizing invisible debt protects your autonomy and prevents manipulators from turning kindness into a tool for control. Awareness, boundaries, and self-validation are your best defense against this subtle but draining tactic.
Sabotage by omission. All right, let's talk about a manipulation tactic that's sneaky because it hides in silence. Sabotage by omission. This is when someone deliberately withholds key information, knowing that the person on the receiving end will struggle or fail. Later, the manipulator swoops in, presenting themselves as knowledgeable, capable, or superior, even though they caused the problem in the first place. Imagine this scenario. You're working on a project and need certain files, instructions, or updates to do it correctly. A coworker knows what you need, but doesn't tell you. You fumble, deadlines slip, mistakes happen. Later, that same coworker says, "Oh, you missed that because you didn't check the email I sent." Suddenly, they look competent while you're left feeling embarrassed or incompetent. That's sabotage by omission. This tactic works because humans assume others are acting in good faith. We trust that important information will be shared. Manipulators exploit that trust, withholding critical details so we stumble while they gain credibility or leverage. It's indirect but incredibly effective for controlling perception and reputation. You see sabotage by omission in many settings. At work, colleagues may leave out steps, deadlines, or contacts that are essential to success, then act surprised when mistakes occur. In group projects or teams, someone might omit crucial context so that others rely on them later to fix the problem. Even in personal relationships, partners or friends may leave out information about plans, responsibilities, or expectations, making the other person appear disorganized or forgetful. Here's why it's so effective. It creates dependency and imbalance. By keeping you in the dark, the manipulator positions themselves as the knowledgeable one, the problem solver, or the authority. Meanwhile, you expend energy figuring out what should have been provided, feeling inadequate for struggling with avoidable challenges. A classic example, imagine a manager who doesn't inform you about a new internal policy. You make a decision based on old procedures and it backfires. The manager then steps in and says, "If you had followed the updated policy, this wouldn't have happened," highlighting your mistake while making themselves look competent and responsible. The omission was intentional, but you bear the consequences.
Sabotage by omission often pairs with other tactics like micro-approval control or selective praise politics. Withholding information causes mistakes, then praise or recognition is selectively given to those aligned with the manipulator. Over time, people rely on the manipulator for guidance, which reinforces their authority. So how do you spot it? Watch for patterns. Crucial information is inconsistently shared or only after mistakes happen. Certain individuals always seem to be in the know, while others struggle due to missing context. Repeated situations where your efforts fail despite following instructions or rules. Once recognized, the first defense is proactive information gathering. Don't rely solely on others to provide updates. Ask questions, double-check instructions, and confirm expectations in writing. The more independent you are in collecting critical information, the less power the manipulator has to sabotage you. Next, document everything. Keep records of emails, instructions, and decisions. If mistakes happen due to missing info, you can clearly show what was known, what was shared, and what wasn't. This protects your credibility and prevents manipulators from claiming superiority. Another strategy is collaborative transparency. Encourage open communication in teams. Regular check-ins, shared documents, and clear expectations make it harder for someone to withhold information without being noticed. Sabotage by omission is powerful because it's invisible to outsiders and hard to prove. The manipulator seems competent and helpful while you struggle silently. But awareness, proactive documentation, and communication strategies reduce its impact, protecting both your performance and your reputation. At the end of the day, manipulation through omission thrives on secrecy and dependency. By staying vigilant, asking questions, and documenting processes, you reclaim control. Information is power. Don't let anyone weaponize the absence of it against you.
Hierarchy smokescreen. All right, let's talk about a manipulation tactic that's subtle but extremely effective. Hierarchy smokescreen. This is when someone uses their position, title, or rank to dismiss, silence, or invalidate legitimate concerns, making it seem like your issue isn't worth discussing simply because of who they are in the organizational ladder. Imagine this. You raise a concern at work about safety procedures, ethical issues, or workload. Instead of engaging, the person responds with something like, "I've been doing this for 20 years, you wouldn't understand." Or, "I'm in charge here, so this decision stands." Suddenly, your legitimate concern feels irrelevant, not because of its merit, but because of their position of authority. That's hierarchy smokescreen in action. This tactic works because humans are wired to respect authority and defer to expertise. Titles, ranks, and seniority carry social weight, which is usually helpful for organizational structure. Manipulators exploit this by hiding behind authority, implying that their opinion or decision is beyond challenge, even if it's flawed, unethical, or damaging. You see hierarchy smokescreens everywhere. In workplaces, managers or executives dismiss employee complaints by citing experience or title. In politics or organizations, leaders may invalidate grassroots concerns by referencing rank or position rather than addressing substance. Even in families, older relatives might silence younger ones with phrases like, "I know better, I'm the parent here." Here's why it's so effective. It short-circuits critical thinking. Instead of addressing the concern, the focus shifts to the person's rank, which can make others feel that questioning is disrespectful, futile, or even risky.
Over time, people internalize that speaking up is pointless unless you hold similar authority. A classic example: imagine a team meeting where an employee notices a flaw in a new process. They raise the issue politely, but the senior manager responds with, "I'm the director, this has been approved at the highest level." End of discussion. The employee is left feeling dismissed, while the manager maintains control without ever addressing the actual problem. Hierarchy smokescreens often pair with tactics like selective praise politics or false urgency. By using authority as a shield, manipulators can enforce compliance, isolate dissenters, and create a sense of helplessness without ever overtly criticizing anyone. People start self-censoring, aligning with authority instead of advocating for legitimate concerns. So how do you spot it? Watch for patterns. Concerns or complaints are dismissed solely based on the person raising them, not on content. Authority or title is emphasized as the reason the decision cannot be questioned. Discussions or debates are shut down quickly, leaving no space for feedback. Once recognized, the first defense is always to focus on facts, not hierarchy. When raising concerns, stick to objective data, documented evidence, and clear reasoning. This makes it harder for someone to dismiss your point simply because of your position relative to theirs. Next, seek allies or multiple perspectives. Discuss concerns with peers, cross-department teams, or external advisors to validate your observations. Strength in numbers and collective evidence reduces the effectiveness of authority-based dismissal. Another strategy is frame concerns in a non-confrontational way. Instead of challenging rank directly, focus on outcomes. Here's a potential risk if we continue this approach. Addressing it could save time, resources, or problems. This keeps the conversation about results rather than hierarchy, making it harder for the manipulator to shut you down. Hierarchy smokescreen is powerful because it leverages social norms and human deference to authority. It silences legitimate issues without appearing aggressive or unreasonable. But awareness, objective framing, and strategic alliances can neutralize its impact. At the end of the day, authority should guide decisions, not suppress valid concerns. Recognizing when rank is being used as a smokescreen protects your voice, encourages accountability, and ensures that important issues aren't ignored just because someone holds a title.
The divide and conquer office. All right, let's dive into a classic manipulation tactic that's been around forever: divide and conquer. In the workplace, it's when management or a manipulative colleague intentionally pits employees against each other so they remain distracted, competitive, and ultimately easier to control. The goal is simple: keep people divided so no one challenges authority or questions unfair practices. Imagine this scenario. Two colleagues are working on the same project. Instead of encouraging collaboration, a manager subtly compares their performance. "I noticed you finished your report faster than Alex, good job." Or, "Alex, you need to step up if you want to keep up with the team." Suddenly, the employees start competing, second-guessing each other, and worrying about personal standing instead of focusing on the bigger picture. That's divide and conquer at work. This tactic works because humans naturally respond to social comparison and competition. When people feel like they are being measured against each other, anxiety spikes, collaboration decreases, and attention shifts from questioning authority to outperforming peers. The manipulator benefits because everyone is distracted, stressed, and more focused on survival within the hierarchy than challenging the system. You see divide and conquer in many workplaces.
Managers subtly pit employees against each other for promotions, recognition, or bonuses. Teams are intentionally siloed so communication is limited and information becomes a tool of power. Gossip, selective praise, or comparisons are used strategically to make people suspicious of colleagues. Here's why it's so effective. It creates tension without direct confrontation. Instead of the manipulator openly attacking employees, they let employees undermine each other. The energy that could have gone into collaboration, innovation, or challenging unfair practices gets redirected into defending oneself or outshining peers. A classic example: imagine a team meeting where the manager says, "I'm impressed with Maria's results this month. John, I hope you can match that next time." John immediately feels pressure, resentment, or jealousy toward Maria, even though she did nothing wrong. Meanwhile, the manager sits back, controls the narrative, and maintains power by keeping employees divided. Divide and conquer often pairs with tactics like selective praise politics or false urgency. Praise loyalists, create competition, and assign impossible deadlines, and suddenly employees are too preoccupied with outdoing each other to notice manipulative patterns. Over time, morale drops, trust erodes, and the manipulator's influence grows. So how do you spot it? Watch for patterns. Team members are constantly compared or ranked, even subtly. Information is selectively shared to create advantage for some and disadvantage for others. Suspicion, gossip, or competition increases while collaboration decreases. Once recognized, the first defense is building trust and communication. Strengthen relationships with colleagues openly and transparently. Share information, collaborate when possible, and resist the manipulator's attempts to isolate individuals. The more the team trusts each other, the weaker divide and conquer strategies become. Next, focus on your own work and boundaries. Don't get caught in unnecessary competition for validation or approval. Evaluate performance against your own goals and standards, rather than constantly comparing yourself to peers. Another strategy is to address the manipulator indirectly. Encourage inclusive team discussions, shared goals, and collective problem-solving. Highlight collaboration over individual competition in a way that doesn't directly confront the manipulator, but reduces their leverage. Divide and conquer is powerful because it manipulates natural social instincts, competition, comparison, and desire for approval. Left unchecked, it erodes trust, morale, and collective power, making everyone easier to control. But awareness, collaboration, and boundary setting neutralize its effect. At the end of the day, unity is the antidote to manipulation. By recognizing when division is being sown and taking deliberate steps to maintain transparency and trust, employees can reclaim control, reduce stress, and resist manipulation in the workplace.
Fear of missing out, or FOMO. All right, let's dive into a manipulation tactic that's everywhere in modern life. Fear of missing out, or FOMO. This is when someone or something exploits your anxiety about being left out, excluded, or missing opportunities to influence your decisions, behavior, or spending. It's subtle, psychological, and incredibly effective because it taps directly into a natural human instinct, the need to belong. Think about it.
You see an advertisement for a sale that ends in 2 hours. A social media post showing your friends at a cool event, or a message like, "Only a few spots left." Suddenly, your brain kicks into panic mode. You feel the pressure to act immediately or risk missing out. That anxiety can push you to make decisions that aren't in your best interest. Buying unnecessary items, overcommitting, or agreeing to situations you'd normally avoid. FOMO works because humans are social creatures wired for belonging and inclusion. Being excluded historically meant danger. In ancestral environments, being cut off from the group could mean death. Modern manipulators exploit that same instinct in psychological and commercial ways. When you feel like you might be left out, your rational thinking diminishes and emotional reaction drives behavior. You see FOMO in many areas: marketing and sales. Limited time offers, flash sales, or last chance emails, or exclusive launches are designed to trigger urgency and fear of missing out. Social media, endless feeds of people living exciting lives can make you feel like you're not keeping up, which can manipulate your mood, spending habits, or lifestyle choices. Work or networking. Messages like, "Everyone's attending this meeting, you should be too," create pressure to comply, even if attendance isn't necessary. Here's why it's so effective: because it creates a sense of urgency without direct coercion. Unlike a direct demand, FOMO relies on emotional pressure and social comparison. You feel compelled to act not because it's rational, but because your brain doesn't want to miss the perceived opportunity or social acceptance. A classic example: imagine you're browsing an online store and see, "Only 3 items left in stock. Don't miss out." Even if you didn't plan to buy anything, your brain interprets this as a loss threat. You rush to purchase, fearing regret or exclusion. The manipulator's goal isn't to meet your need. It's to exploit your natural anxiety and urgency to generate compliance. FOMO is often paired with other manipulation tactics like scarcity clock or conditional kindness. Limited time offers and social pressure work together to amplify anxiety, increasing the likelihood of impulsive decisions. Over time, people internalize a constant feeling of not enough or being behind, which keeps them compliant and reactive. So, how do you spot it? Watch for patterns. Emotional pressure to act fast or participate in something because others are doing it. Messages or cues designed to make you feel excluded, left behind, or at a disadvantage. Decisions driven by fear of loss or social comparison rather than actual need or desire. Once recognized, the first defense is pause and evaluate. Ask yourself, do I really want this? Am I acting because of my own priorities or because I fear missing out? Taking a moment breaks the emotional spike that FOMO relies on. Next, focus on intrinsic motivation. Make choices based on your own goals, values, and needs, rather than social cues or artificial scarcity. This reduces susceptibility to emotional manipulation. Another strategy is limit exposure to triggers. Social media, aggressive marketing, or peer pressure can constantly provoke FOMO. Reducing exposure or curating what you consume helps you respond intentionally instead of reactively. FOMO is powerful because it exploits a basic human instinct: belonging. Manipulators, marketers, or even peers can weaponize it to influence behavior subtly and repeatedly. Awareness, reflection, and intentional decision-making break the cycle, giving you control back over your choices. At the end of the day, missing out isn't the end of the world. Opportunities come and go, but your mental clarity, autonomy, and priorities matter more than reacting to every external cue. Recognizing when FOMO is influencing you keeps your decisions grounded, deliberate, and free from manipulation.
Astroturfing. The term comes from astroturf, the fake grass, and that's exactly what it is. Fake grassroots support designed to make something seem bigger, more popular, or more legitimate than it really is. The goal? To influence opinions, behavior, or decisions by creating the illusion of mass approval. Imagine scrolling through social media and seeing a campaign, product, or movement that looks like everyone is backing it. Hundreds of comments, likes, and shares, all praising or supporting the cause. You think, wow, this must be important. Everyone is on board. But in reality, many of those posts, reviews, or accounts might be fake, automated, or orchestrated. That's astroturfing, manufacturing consensus where no naturally exists. This tactic works because humans are social creatures, heavily influenced by perceived consensus. We often assume that if many people approve, it must be correct, credible, or worthwhile. Manipulators exploit this instinct by artificially boosting popularity, creating pressure to conform or increase credibility of a product, idea, or movement. You see astroturfing in many areas. Politics. Campaigns may generate fake grassroots support for legislation or candidates, creating the illusion that the public wants this. Marketing. Fake reviews, paid influences, or coordinated posts make products look universally loved. Social issues. Online petitions, hashtags, or viral trends can be manipulated to appear overwhelmingly popular. Here's why it's so effective. It triggers social proof, one of the most powerful psychological principles. When people see others supporting something, they feel safer joining in, even if they haven't critically evaluated it. This sense of popularity or acceptance can push entire groups to comply or endorse ideas that may be artificial. A classic example: imagine a new product launching online. Thousands of verified buyers rave about it in glowing reviews. But in reality, many of these accounts are bots or paid promoters. You might think, everyone seems to love this, so I should get it too, falling right into the manipulation trap. The perceived popularity becomes a pressure point, even if the actual support is minimal or fake. Astroturfing often pairs with other manipulation tactics like false consensus trick or scarcity clock. By making support appear massive and urgent, manipulators increase pressure to act quickly and conform, whether it's buying a product, joining a movement, or backing a social cause. Over time, repeated exposure makes the manufactured popularity feel real, and people stop questioning it. So how do you spot it? Look for patterns. Overly coordinated or repetitive messaging that seems too uniform to be organic. High volume of support from accounts with little personal history or inconsistent activity. Pressure to conform or act quickly,
often paired with messages implying universal approval. Once recognized, the first defense is critical thinking and independent verification. Check multiple reliable sources and look beyond social media hype. Popularity does not equal truth or quality. Next, question the origin of support. Who is benefiting from the movement, product, or campaign? Is there evidence of genuine grassroots involvement, or does it seem manufactured? Understanding motives helps protect you from manipulation. Another strategy is resist emotional pressure. Astroturfing often triggers FOMO, peer pressure, or social comparison. By pausing, evaluating, and making decisions based on your own priorities rather than perceived popularity, you avoid being swept along by false consensus. Astroturfing is powerful because it manipulates the human instinct to follow the crowd. It creates the illusion of legitimacy, urgency, and social proof, all tools to suddenly influence behavior. But awareness, research, and independent judgment break the spell, letting you act based on reality rather than manufactured opinion.
Anchoring bias is basically when someone shows you an absurdly high price or value first, so that the real price, which might still be high, suddenly feels reasonable, affordable, or even like a bargain. Your brain compares it to the anchor, not to actual value, and that's exactly what the manipulator wants. Imagine walking into a store and seeing a designer jacket priced at $2,000. Your brain automatically registers that as the anchor. Then you see a second jacket priced at $500 and think, wow, this one's cheap compared to the first. But $500 might still be far more than the jacket is actually worth. That's the anchoring bias in action. Your perception of value is influenced more by the first number you saw than the true cost. This tactic works because humans rely on initial information as a reference point, consciously or subconsciously. That first number sets a mental benchmark or anchor, and everything after it is judged relative to that anchor. Marketers, salespeople, and manipulators use this to nudge decisions and make us feel like we're getting a deal, even when we might be overspending. You see anchoring bias tricks everywhere. Retail, showing original prices slashed to discounted amounts, even if the original was inflated. Online marketplaces displaying premium packages first to make standard options feel cheap. Negotiations, opening with an extreme offer so any compromise feels favorable. Here's why it's so effective. It exploits a natural shortcut in human thinking. Instead of evaluating prices logically or independently, our brains compare to the first number we encounter. That comparison creates a sense of relative value, which can influence spending, decisions, or agreement. A classic example, imagine a gym membership. The first plan you see costs $200 per month. The next plan is $80 per month. Suddenly, $80 feels like a steal, even if the gym's standard market rate is $50. Your perception has been manipulated by the anchor. The gym doesn't have to lower prices, they just make you feel like you're getting a deal. Anchoring bias is often paired with other tactics like scarcity clock or fear of missing out, FOMO. First, the high anchor sets a perceived value, then time-limited offers or social pressure push you to commit quickly, reducing critical evaluation. Together, they create a powerful mix of urgency, perceived savings, and emotional pressure. So, how do you spot it? Look for patterns. The first price or value you see seems unusually high compared to subsequent options.
Discounts or comparisons rely on that initial number rather than independent market research. You feel compelled to buy quickly because it feels like a bargain, not because it's objectively a good deal. Once recognized, the first defense is independent evaluation. Compare prices, research market value, and focus on actual utility rather than relative appearance. Don't let the first number you see dictate your perception. Next, pause and reflect. Ask yourself, am I really getting a good deal, or does it just feel cheap because of the initial price? Taking a moment breaks the emotional pull of anchoring. Another strategy is ignore the anchor entirely. Focus on your own budget, needs, and priorities. Decide what you're willing to pay before encountering the first number so you aren't manipulated by external benchmarks. Anchoring bias is powerful because it manipulates perception subtly and consistently. We rarely notice it. Our brains just make the comparison automatically. But once you're aware, you can resist feeling pressured or tricked by arbitrary numbers. At the end of the day, don't let the first price you see control your decisions. Evaluate independently, prioritize value, and make choices based on your own criteria rather than artificially set anchors. Awareness is your best weapon against this classic sales manipulation trick.
The decoy effect. This is when a seller or marketer offers a third option, intentionally useless or overpriced, to make another choice look way more appealing. That third option doesn't exist to sell itself. It exists to nudge you toward the choice they want you to pick. Imagine this scenario. A popcorn stand offers two sizes, small for $3, large for $6. You might hesitate. Is the large really worth twice the price? Then they add a medium for $5.50, almost the same as the large. Suddenly, the large one looks like a much better deal. That medium option is a decoy. It's not meant to be chosen. It's meant to make the target choice, the large, feel smarter and cheaper by comparison. This tactic works because humans rely on relative comparison rather than absolute value. We don't always evaluate each option independently. We judge by how it stacks up against other choices. The decoy is designed to manipulate that comparison, making the target option seem optimal, even if it's not objectively the best deal. You see the decoy effect everywhere. In marketing, subscription plans where a middle or extreme option makes the target plan look ideal. Restaurants and menus, an outrageously priced dish makes the next highest option seem reasonable. Online services, adding a slightly worse or more expensive tier pushes users to the recommended plan. Here's why it's so effective. It preys on decision fatigue and our instinct to pick the smartest option. Rather than analyzing each choice on its own, our brain uses the decoy as a reference, thinking, okay, if I pick the one just above this useless option, I'm getting a good deal. That nudge is subtle, almost invisible, but it guides behavior consistently. A classic example, imagine software pricing. There's a basic plan for $10 a month, a premium plan for $25 a month, and a professional plan for $27 a month. That $27 plan is slightly better than the premium, but nearly identical in price. The professional plan isn't meant to sell. It's a decoy. Most people now feel the $25 premium is a steal. The company just steered your decision without you realizing it.
The decoy effect often pairs with other tactics, like anchoring bias or scarcity clock. First, the decoy manipulates your perception of value, then urgency or limited availability pushes you to act quickly. Combined, they create a potent psychological nudge that feels like a personal choice, but it's actually guided by subtle manipulation. So, how do you spot it? Watch for patterns. One option seems obviously worse or almost useless compared to another, yet is still highlighted. Pricing or features are structured to make one choice feel superior by comparison. Your decision feels influenced more by contrast than by actual need or utility. Once recognized, the first defense is to evaluate options independently. Don't compare automatically. Consider each choice on its own merits. Ask yourself, do I need this? Is this really the best value for me? Next, ignore the decoy's intended influence. Recognize that the extra option exists to manipulate your perception, not to provide genuine choice. This helps you make decisions based on your priorities, not the seller's strategy. Another strategy is to set your criteria beforehand. Decide your budget, features, or needs before encountering the options. That way, decoys and manipulative structures have less impact because your decision isn't guided by relative comparison at the moment. The decoy effect is powerful because it operates below conscious awareness. You often think you're making a rational choice, but your brain is being subtly steered toward the target option. Awareness breaks the cycle, giving you real control over your decisions. At the end of the day, don't let fake comparisons decide for you. Recognize decoys, analyze options on their own, and make choices aligned with your needs and priorities. Once you see the tactic, it loses its power, and you reclaim your decision-making freedom.
False scarcity drops. This is when a seller pretends that stock is limited, supplies are running out, or an offer is ending soon in order to make you rush into a purchase. It's basically panic buying, triggered by fear, not by actual scarcity. Imagine scrolling through an online store and seeing a product you like. Suddenly, a message pops up. Only 3 left in stock. Or, sale ends in 2 hours. Your brain immediately kicks into high alert. You think, I have to act now or I'll miss out. And before you know it, you've bought something you hadn't planned on, or maybe something you don't even need. That's the power of false scarcity. This tactic works because humans are wired to react to potential loss more strongly than potential gain. Psychologists call this the loss aversion principle. Losing something triggers more intense emotions than gaining the same thing. Manipulators exploit that instinct. By creating the illusion of scarcity, they make you feel like you'll lose out if you don't act immediately. You see false scarcity drops everywhere. E-commerce sites and flash sales, limited stock numbers, timers or almost gone alerts. Concert tickets or event sales, only a few seats left at this price. Signs create urgency. Subscription services offer ends tonight to push people to sign up immediately. Here's why it's so effective. It bypasses rational thinking. Instead of evaluating whether you really need the item, you're driven by fear of missing out. The urgency feels real, even when the scarcity is completely fabricated.
Many people buy impulsively, fearing regret or social pressure, which is exactly what the manipulator wants. A classic example: imagine a sneaker drop. The website shows, "Hurry, only 2 pairs left." In reality, they may have hundreds in stock, but the perceived scarcity drives thousands of buyers to rush and purchase before thinking critically. The illusion makes you believe the item is highly demanded, exclusive, or valuable, manipulating your emotions and urgency. False scarcity often pairs with other tactics like scarcity clock or FOMO. First, scarcity creates pressure. Then, fear of missing out amplifies the urgency. Over time, repeated exposure to these tactics trains people to act impulsively whenever a limited offer appears, making them predictable and easier to manipulate. So, how do you spot it? Look for patterns. Claims of limited stock or time seem exaggerated or inconsistent. Timers or alerts pressure you to act immediately without providing evidence. You feel rushed, anxious, or panicked about a decision you would normally approach calmly. Once recognized, the first defense is to pause and evaluate. Don't let urgency control your decision. Ask yourself, do I really need this? Is this scarcity genuine or just a tactic? Next, research before committing. Check multiple sources, wait a little if possible, and verify stock levels or availability independently. Often, the limited claim is designed purely to provoke action, not to reflect reality. Another strategy is to focus on priorities, not pressure. Make purchases based on your actual needs, budget, and value, rather than external cues designed to trigger anxiety. This neutralizes the emotional manipulation and gives you control over your choices. False scarcity drops are powerful because they exploit one of the strongest human instincts, the fear of loss. The emotional response they trigger can override rational thinking, driving impulsive behavior and unnecessary spending. But awareness and patience and independent evaluation break the illusion, letting you act intentionally rather than reacting to a manipulative countdown timer. Recognizing false scarcity keeps you calm, deliberate, and immune to panic buying tactics.